The regular meetings of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the Township of Belleville for January 3rd, 2019 will now come to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Bennett. Here. Caruso.
Here.
Giordano.
Here.
Casa.
Here.
Lopez.
Here.
Lozowa. Here. Sheldon.
Here.
Milano.
Here.
Del Garcia.
Here. Everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, has notice of this meeting been given in accordance with the Sunshine Law?
Certification of the meeting has been advertised according to the contract.
Okay. Members. Slide in. Has everyone had a chance to look over the meetings from last month's
Yes.
meetings?
Yes.
Any changes?
Motion to approve.
No changes. Motion to approve made by Mr. Valano. Do I get a second? Seconded by Mr. Giordano. Clerk, call the roll.
Bennett. Yes. Caruso.
Yes.
Lopez.
Yes.
Sheldon.
Yes.
Milano.
Yes.
Del Garcia.
Yes. Okay, resolutions, not resolutions, sorry, applications for adjournment. I have a number of them. First case on the agenda, ZB 2018-04, 548, 568 Franklin Avenue, Sound Development LLC. I have a letter dated December 28th to myself. Dear Chairman Del Garcia, please be advised that in an effort to further reduce the parking variance and density pertaining to the above proposed zoning board project, we are requesting an adjournment of the matter to February 7, 2019. We anticipate closing on the lot owned by the township within the next 3 weeks. As a result, we ask that this case be carried and that any new notice requirements be waived. I don't know if we can do that. No, I don't think we can do that.
I think this is a pretty different application, I would think.
Well, it's got additional lot of a quarter of an acre involved.
Yeah, no, I would think they would need to renotice.
Yes, that's what and that's my understanding. I don't know why this is written this way. As they pertain to the adjournment request, thank you for your courtesy. So I would adjourn this to next month, but we would notify Ms. Perna, who's the attorney of record, it's signed by Ms. Perna, that she needs to give notice, and it was my understanding she knew there was new notice needed because of the additional lot involved. And I believe also that she should put in her notice that she's requesting a reverse subdivision, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so,
So, for the
go ahead,
record,
for the record.
would our council do the noticing of Ms. Burnett?
Did you talk to her?
Well, I'm just saying though, but I don't want to hear next week or next month
Well-
and say she never got notified.
No, but why don't you call her? I'll
That's
give you
my
her
point.
number.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, I'll give him her number, he'll call her directly,
Thank you.
okay, within this week.
Okay.
Okay, next case on the agenda to be adjourned is ZB 2018-11, 1721 Brook Street, All City Restoration. I have a letter dated also December 28th, and that is addressed to Ms. Ciccarelli. I am writing to respectfully request an adjournment with regard to the above captioned matter. We are requesting that the application for All City Restoration Incorporated, previously scheduled to be heard at the January 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment, be adjourned until the February 7th, 2000 meeting. The adjournment is being requested in order to allow sufficient time for revised plans submitted in connection with this application to be reviewed by the board's experts. As legal notice has already been provided in connection with this application, we respectfully request that the chairman of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment permit the adjournment to the February 7, 2019 meeting without further notice or an appearance on the part of the applicant being required. In consideration for this adjournment request, the applicant agrees to suspend any and all applicable time limits for municipal action for the duration of the adjournment. Thank you in advance for your time and assistance in connection with this request. Signed, Michael J. Paramali, Esquire. I think I got it right this time. Okay. So anyone in the audience who's interested in that case, CB 2018-11, 1721 Brook Street, that will be adjourned to the February 7th, 2019 meeting without any further notices in the newspaper or in the mail. However, the first case that we adjourned will require new notices to everyone within 200 feet and in the mail. And that is ZB 2018-04. Okay, now, number 4 on the agenda, which is on the agenda for the first time. ZB 2018-12, 5759 Magnolia Street, Michael Silvestri. The applicant is seeking approval to construct a new 2-car garage in the rear yard of the existing dwelling. I have a notice dated December 27th, made to Ms. Ciccarelli. I am writing to respectfully request an adjournment with regard to the above captioned matter. We are requesting that the application for Michael Silvestri, presently scheduled to be heard at the January 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment, be adjourned until the February 7th, 2019 meeting. The adjournment is being requested due to the unavailability of the applicant to attend the January 3rd, 2019 meeting. As legal notice has already been provided in connection with this application, we respectfully request that the chairman of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment permit the adjournment to the February 7, 2019 meeting without further notice or an appearance on the part of the applicant being required. In consideration for this adjournment request, the applicant agrees to suspend any and all applicable time limits for municipal action for the duration of the adjournment. Thank you in advance for your time and assistance in this request. With regards, Michael J. Paramali. Again, so there'll be no new notices, either in the mail or in the newspaper, for ZB 2018-12, 5759 Magnolia Street. Last case on our agenda, number 5, ZB 2018-13, 90 Franklin Street, Carmen Fortunato. Fortunato, okay. The applicant is seeking approval to legalize the use of the subject property as a mixed-use building with 2 commercial tenant spaces on the first floor and 1 residential studio apartment on the first floor. That's what it says. Okay. This request for adjournment was dated December 27th, 2018, again to Ms. Ciccarelli. I am writing to respectfully request an adjournment with regard to the above captioned matter. We are requesting that the application for Carmen Fortunato, I'm terrible Italian, presently scheduled to be heard at the January 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment, be adjourned until the February 7th, 2019 meeting. The adjournment is being requested due to the unavailability of the applicant to attend the January 3rd, 2019 meeting. As legal notice has already been provided in connection with this application, we respectfully request the chairman of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment permit the adjournment to the February 7th, 2019 meeting without further notice or an appearance on the part of the applicant being required. In consideration for this adjournment request, the applicant agrees to suspend any and all applicable time limits for municipal action for the duration of the adjournment. Thank you in advance for your time and assistance in connection with this request. With regards, Michael J. Paramali. Okay, so the last case, ZB 2018-13, 90 Franklin Street. Anybody in the audience that's interested in that, there will be no, it's adjourned to Thursday, February 7, 2019. There'll be no further notice either in the newspaper or in the mail. And that's the end of our adjournments. No resolutions ready for tonight. We have a communication. And I believe this communication, is in regard to 187 Overlook. Am I correct?
Yes.
And in that case, we have a copy in our packets of the case that was decided, the resolution. And in that case, Mr. Caruso, Mr. Giordano, Mr. Shelton, myself and Mr. Villano participated in that case. And the request, I have the request in writing. It was dated November 16, 2018. to Mr. Di Lorenzo. And this has to do with Onyx, ONYX 424 LLC, 187 Overlook Avenue, Block 6404, Lot 5. Dear Mr. Di Lorenzo, please accept this writing as a formal request on behalf of Onyx 424 LLC as applicant for 1-year extension of the 2-year time limit to begin construction in connection with the variance application approved by the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment in connection with the above captioned property. The variance application request was approved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment at its January 5th, 2017 meeting and memorialized by resolution at its February 2nd, 2017 meeting. I have enclosed hereby a copy of the said resolution of approval for your review. Counting from February 2nd, 2017, the original 2-year time limit is set to expire on February 2nd, 2019, and we are requesting an additional 1-year extension from February 2nd, 2019 to run through February 2nd, 2020. It is further our position on behalf of the applicant that no additional legal notice is required for the requested extension. It is our hope that this extension request can be heard at the December 6, 2018 meeting, which it wasn't, of the Belleville Zoning Board of Adjustment. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to call. Of course, signed again by Mr. Michael J. Palmieri. If we look through this resolution, okay, and I have a problem with this is, let me see, where is it? If you remember this case, the 5 of us that participated, it was in a one-family zone. It never had anything built on it. He was requesting a one-family house. There was a number of objectors in the audience, but we gave him his okay for the one family. The only thing we did was lower from 4 bedrooms to 3.
Right.
Okay, and the reason was that the man has a right to develop his property, even though it's an undersized lot. And we agreed that he was asking for the minimum requirement, and we had no problem, okay? My problem is he stated, and it's in here, he stated that they were going to build a one-family and then sell it, which I have no problem with. The problem is, never built a house, never even started, never did nothing, never even took out a permit, because if he took out a permit, we wouldn't be here. And he had it for sale. There was a for sale sign. I saw it there when all this came up, but I went by there the other day and the for sale sign's not there anymore. So I am wondering, Mr. Gassion, I assume you're has anything changed? Has he sold the property? What's going on?
They have not sold the property. We are looking for an extension. You mentioned that there were objectors here. The objectors were not objecting, I don't recall, to the building of the house. They were concerned about a tank that was on the property, and that tank was a tank that belonged to someone else.
Next door.
And they had somehow had their tank on my client's property.
That's correct.
Now, let me explain something to you. That is true. It was the person to the right, if I remember correctly, to the right of the property,
Remember
facing
which
the
side?
property. That's how good I have a memory. But there was people that didn't want nothing built there.
You could be
And we
right.
had to explain to them in detail
Right.
that that would result in confiscation of the man's property if he's not allowed to develop it.
So what's the point?
No, I just wanted to make that clear because he said nobody objected to the building of the house.
I said, to my recollection, they were
We're here
objecting
for an
to
extension.
Yes.
Either we're gonna approve
We're
it
here
or
for an
not.
extension. Now, I have no problem with the extension. My problem is, I don't want him coming back here a year from now and doing nothing.
He can't. I mean, he needs your approval if he were to come back.
Well, let
you
him
don't-
know, I have no problem giving him the 1
The
year.
client is here and he's listening to what you said.
Oh, good, I'm happy. Mr. Valano, you want to say something?
I'm just saying, to the council's point, if we wish to give an extension, we can say, this is, last and final extension. That's it.
1 year extension, that's it.
Right.
That's what we're
That's
asking.
it.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair
I
too.
mean, 2 years is more than enough time.
Anybody else have a problem with that?
Negative.
Okay,
Okay.
so I would make, you're making a motion or I'll make a
I'll
motion?
make the motion.
Motion to extend for 1 year. Do I have a second? All right, seconded by Mr. Caruso. Gina, you would only be calling the 5 members that participated in this case,
Correct.
You
okay?
have to remove that oil tank.
That's in the resolution.
That's already
That's
there.
already in the resolution.
We're not here to
That's not the issue.
Is the board gonna want a resolution on this or a letter from?
I don't know, what's needed?
I think a resolution to extend
That
it
would,
for 1 year.
that would be
I think that'd be the
a
safest
thorough
thing.
way.
Okay. With the condition in there that there will be no further extension,
That's
Yep.
it, none.
okay?
Yep.
Okay. You have a copy of the resolution, am I right,
Yeah.
Gina?
I do.
All right, so call only the names of the people who voted for it.
Caruso,
Yes.
Giordano,
Yes.
Sheldon,
Yes.
Casa,
Yes.
Milano,
Yes.
Del Garcia.
Yes. Approved.
Thank you for your time and attention.
You're welcome.
My client heard, and they understand.
Thank you.
You go. You got a 1 year period. That's it.
Okay, now, the one case on the agenda that we are scheduled to hear tonight is ZB 2017-18. The applicant is proposing to add retail of auto parts to existing warehouse at 3337 Rutgers Street Parts Authority. And if I'm correct, the Parts Authority does not own the property, they're just one of the tenants.
That is correct. They are the only tenant. The owner occupies a portion of the property, and they are the only tenant, as I recall.
The only other tenant.
Well, the owner occupies a portion of the property.
So there's two
I'm not
tenants.
considering the owner a tenant, but yes,
An
there's
owner's
two
not a
uses,
tenant.
if that's your point.
Owner's not considered a tenant. Okay. All right. So we have 2 people occupying the property.
That is correct.
Okay. You may proceed, Ms. Gassion, at your pleasure.
I believe there is another attorney interested in this case. I didn't see him come in, but I would bet he's here. You mean right here, Bob?
Hey, Jack.
It's so nice, it's so friendly before the case starts,
I sneaked
isn't
up.
it?
You know what? We'll have to be friendly all night long. For the record, Mr.
Why don't you
Chairman.
gentlemen both, but Bob, I don't think you've
Actually,
put your name on the record.
Counsel's name is Robert Gassion. I represent the applicant in this matter.
Thank you.
John R. Dusenberry, representing Modern Auto Parts.
Okay.
Now, did you review the notices?
Notices are notice and publication. It's fine.
Okay. So that would be A1 for evidence, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You may participate, Mr. Gassion.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you know, counsel's name is Robert Gassion. The firm is Gassion Bamako, 524 Union Avenue in Belleville. I represent the applicant in this matter, Jamso LLC, the owner of the property. The applicant is before the board this evening with regard to use of the property at 3337 Rutgers Street. We had previously started the case. My associate, Mr. Piramali, had started the case. It was determined somewhere fairly shortly after the case started that there was another use on the property, and therefore we requested an adjournment. The adjournment was granted, and it has been a long time putting everything together, the amended plans, etc., and new notice, everything with regard to this case. So we're now here, we're starting all over again. That obviously is a part of the record, but there's new board members, different circumstances.
Yes.
We're starting all over again.
Also, I believe there's been a change in the zoning law
There has.
which allows the 2 uses.
There's no longer 2 use variances on this application. There's one in that the use of retail is not permitted. The fact of principal uses, the ordinance now allows actually, I believe, 3 principal uses.
Yes.
So the applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval in addition to a use variance and bulk variances to add a retail use in 1,970 square feet of the existing 19,951 square feet that Parts Authority occupies. They are seeking to sell auto parts in that 1,970 square feet. The property is in the IB zone and retail use is not permitted. In addition to the use variance, the applicant is seeking a number of bulk variances all of which are pre-existing, except for the change in the parking requirement, in that there is an additional one space required as a result of the 1,940 square feet being used for retail. The witnesses you'll hear from this evening are Slava Gorislevich of the Tenant Parts Authority, Bob Cazarelli, the architect, and Mike Petrie, the engineer and planner. Slava will discuss the history of Parts Authority in Belleville and what it is they are seeking approval to do. He also will review the proposed operation of the retail area. Mr. Cazarelli will, of course, review the plans for the retail area and generally discuss the warehouse area. The final witness will be Mike Petrie, who will discuss the site and propose changes to the site. He will also review all the variances and explain his reasons why he thinks the application should be approved and what will allow the board to approve this application. I'd like to call my first witness.
Yes,
Slava.
but before you do that, I would like to swear in Mr. Di Lorenzo and Mr. Hurwitz, please.
Gentlemen, if you could raise your right hands with regard to this application, do you swear that any comments you shall make shall be the truth? Frank Di Lorenzo, the zoning officer, and Tom Harris, the board engineer/planner.
There's a reason for that. Now, Mr. Hurwitz, in your report dated December 3rd, 2018, on the second page, I believe it says, in addition, go down to, let's see, it should be noted that the majority of the bulk variances are pre-existing, and in addition, there are D variances associated with this as follows. Use, 2 principal uses on 1 lot. Is that now?
No, that should came out.
That should have came out.
I was going to bring it to your attention.
Okay, so, okay.
Before this whole.
So I want to get that clear before we proceed. Okay, all right. Thank you. Now, Mr. Gassion.
Before I start my case, Mr. Dusenberry, I believe, has an order.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes.
Representing my client, I would say that Mr. Gassion has articulated the relief that's being sought. I will alert you to one potential issue that I've seen, and that is that there may be an increase by this application of the lot coverage calculation by virtue of the, we'll get into it with Mr. Petrie when he does engineering testimony, but I don't sandbag anybody, so I'm just telling you, you might want to look to that issue. There may be a certain enlargement of the parking lot above its existing conditions. So other than that, I think the relief that's been articulated is correct, and it's certainly our opinion that when it comes to the heart of this issue, and that is a use variance in the IB zone, that this is certainly a huge hurdle for the applicant to jump, and we will demonstrate, we believe, that they will not be able to meet their burden of proof. Thank you.
Mr. Dusenberg, in addition to obviously cross-examining Mr. Gassion's witnesses, do you plan on presenting an affirmative case?
We do not.
You do not?
We
Okay,
do
thank
not.
you.
Now, with the only reservation that you never know how cases go,
Oh, I
and
understand.
something may
Okay,
change my mind on that issue. But at the moment, we do not.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gassion, continue.
Oh.
We can do this. So you can be over here.
He's going to stand right here.
Stand right here. Okay, come on.
Yeah.
I'm short, I'll move my leg.
Okay, you guys give me your full name.
Slava Goroslavtsev.
You got to speak loud and clear.
Slava Goroslavtsev.
Spell it, please.
Slava Gorisla, V as in Victor, T-S-E-V.
Thank you. Could you raise your right hand, please? With regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Although his name is not as difficult as Mr. Firmali's, I'm going to record it.
I like that. He missed it, but I like it.
Slava, what is your business address?
37 Rutgers Street, Belleville, New Jersey.
And what is your occupation?
Regional General Manager,
Regional General Manager for whom?
Parts Authority.
And
Can I ask a question? You're saying your address is 37 Rutgers Street? You live there?
No,
I said business address.
Business address, okay.
What's the total number of business locations that Parts Authority has in the United States?
215.
And how many of those locations are in New Jersey?
12.
And are you responsible for all 12 of those locations in New Jersey?
Yes.
And is Parts Authority a tenant at 33-37 Rutgers?
Yes.
And for how long have you been at that location?
2 years.
And where were you located prior to moving to the Rutgers Street location?
About 2 blocks over on Cortlandt Street.
And approximately how long had you been on Cortlandt Street?
I do not know. As Parts Authority, we were there for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, we bought a company that existed there.
And so you bought a company and that's how you wound up with the Belleville location in the first place, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you outgrow the previous location?
Yes.
And when you moved to the current location, were you of the impression that you could do retail sales?
Yes.
And why did you think that?
Because we did that at the previous location.
And did there come a time when you became aware that retail sales were not allowed at your current location?
Yes.
And how did you learn that?
Mr. De Lorenzo called me.
And did he indicate to you how he learned you were selling retail and why you were in violation of the ordinance?
Yes.
And have you now stopped retail sales?
Yes.
And have you put up signs to indicate that you no longer have retail sales in order to satisfy Mr. Di Lorenzo's request?
Yes.
Would you generally describe your current business prior to any request for retail sales?
We sell to repair shops. We deliver to repair shops. That's the core of our business.
And do you do retail sales? We talked about 200 and some odd other locations. Do you do retail sales at other locations in the country?
Yes.
What's the percentage of retail sales as opposed to wholesale sales that occur at the locations, if you know?
It's roughly 5 to 8%.
And
Excuse me, is this nationwide?
Yes.
5 to 8% of retail?
Total sales.
5 to 8% of total sales is retail.
Retail, okay.
And have you done any projections as to what kind of retail you expect at this location?
Probably about the same.
And what are the hours of operation that you now have?
Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
And nothing on Sundays?
No.
And if this application were to be approved, would the hours remain the same?
Yes.
And what are the number of employees you have currently?
About 13.
And if this application were to be approved, would that number change?
No.
And can you just review the capacity that these employees are responsible for?
We have a manager, 2 countermen, roughly 3 warehouse people, and the rest of the drivers.
And can you project, or do you project, the number of customers you would get per day if you had the retail use approved?
5 to 10 maximum. I mean, that probably is the norm for us.
And how is waste handled at your location?
We have 2 dumpsters, one for recycles and one for trash.
And you have a private scavenger?
Private scan. Somebody who picks up, yes.
Yes. I have no further questions this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Questions by members of the board of the witness?
I just want to make sure I have the hours of operation. It was 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 on Saturday. Closed on Saturday.
I have just one minor question. In the application narrative, usual verbiage, the question number I, has there been any previous Board of Adjustment or planning board hearings involving this property? It wasn't checked off either yes or no. This is the first time this
Well, it's the first time if you don't count the fact that we were here approximately a year ago to start the case, yes.
all right.
Well, wait a minute. Previously, it had nothing to do with this case.
Oh, no, I'm about us.
There was a previous case approved, which if this is approved, would erase that as far as I'm concerned. And that was, I believe, 40 units residential was approved on this property. Originally, it was 60, I believe, and then they came back and lowered it down to 40 years ago.
I agree with
But
Mr.
nothing was ever
Lorenzo.
built.
I believe there's an approval that sits there for 4 years.
Yeah.
From quite a long time ago. I
Quite
got
a
the
long
resolution.
time, over 10 years, I would say.
Quite a long time.
And technically, if this gets approved, then that use would be abandoned, and that would be in part of the resolution. The previous use has been abandoned.
All right, very good, thank you.
Do you have any objections to that, Mr. Gassion? I just want to nail that down. If this application's approved,
What-
previous...
Whatever the law is, the
Previous
law is.
approval.
I have no objection to the law.
Okay, okay.
Anybody else? Not?
Go ahead, what's your question? Yeah.
You said that about 5 to 8% is the average retail sale of the business, which leaves about maybe 92% of your sales are deliveries. And you're open Monday through Friday and on Saturday as well. What's your estimation on the amount of delivery vehicles coming in and off the property for that 92%?
We have roughly 7.
You have 7 vehicles coming in and out throughout the day.
Yes.
How many deliveries do you think they make on a given day?
I'd have to look at the numbers, but if I'm not wrong, 130?
130 deliveries
Yeah.
Per day.
Yeah.
per day. You also stated that when you moved to this new facility, you weren't aware of the fact that you weren't allowed to do retail there. Do you have an understanding as to why that wasn't researched by the company prior to them moving there?
Do I know why it wasn't researched?
Right, why that wasn't researched, to make sure that if they were moving there and they wanted to do retail there, that it was zoned for that before doing the move?
Well, I was involved in the move, and again, my assumption was we did retail sales down the block, and again, the retail sales were so little that it wouldn't be a problem.
What was the percentage? of retail sales?
5 to 8%.
5 to 8%? On Portland Street?
Yeah. Actually, on Portland Street probably was a little bit less because we were just really not visible at all.
At your previous location in Cortland, were retail sales allowed at that location?
I don't know.
So you don't foresee an increase in retail there beyond the 5 to 8% that you mentioned, given that you're saying that you're going to be a lot more visible now? Do you think the sales are going to be bigger than 8%?
Hard to say. I'm not even
Hard to
sure.
say.
Because when we did sell in the very beginning, you know, it was just like any other location. It wasn't anything busier.
And when would you say most of your deliveries are done out of this location? They deliver to who? I'm sorry, you mentioned before. They deliver
Repair
to-
shops.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Repair shops.
Repair shops? And when do you think or know that most of your deliveries are made throughout the day? In the morning, afternoon,
Our busiest time is
midday?
from 9 to about 2 o'clock. That's the busiest time for us.
So about 9 to 2?
Yeah. From there, our business drops off pretty drastically. In fact, after 5 o'clock is, you know,
Quiet
yeah, we usually get calls for deliveries for the next morning.
next morning.
Yeah.
So you said you have 13 employees. Are those employees that work inside the facility, or is those employees that are doing the deliveries?
That includes the drivers.
You got 5 of them doing deliveries?
What he testified was there were 7 drivers.
7 drivers?
The other 2 are, we use contract
Oh, okay.
drivers. They don't work for us.
And where are the delivery vehicles maintained?
Where are they kept?
Right.
On the lot.
On the lot itself? I don't have any additional questions. Thank you.
Mr. Blanc?
Let's just follow up that question. Regarding the maintaining of it. You only park there, you don't maintain it there.
No, we don't maintain it, just
So,
one.
it's just a storage place overnight.
Yes.
You know, no work is done there, no repairs, cleaning, correct? That's all, okay, that's all.
I have a question of Mr. Di Lorenzo. Mr. Di Lorenzo,
Yes.
are you aware of whether the previous location retail sales were allowed or not?
No, that was in the IB zone also.
That was also in the IB zone. Had that gotten approval by a board of a previous application for a variance?
No, not for retail.
Not for retail, okay. Thank you. Clear up that question that came up. All right, any other members of the public wish to ask questions of this witness based upon testimony given? None?
Before we dismiss, I have one more follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
A question was asked of you, didn't your corporate know anything about, you know, what was permitted, what wasn't permitted? Would you have knowledge on whether they researched that or not?
I could probably tell you that because I was the one spearheading of the move.
And you didn't know anything about it?
I did not.
You made an assumption because you were able to do it here, that you would do it there, correct?
Right.
Fair enough, thank you.
Mr. Dusenberg, do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much,
I
Mr.
thought
Chairman.
you would have got up as part of the public, but that's okay.
Okay, I'm going to just, Goris Lomsk. It's as bad as Dusenberg, I'm sorry. So I'm going to just, Mr. G, if you don't mind, is that good? All right, just make it easy for me.
No problem.
Do you recall testifying March 1st of 2018 on this application?
I do.
Okay, and I do too, all right? Now, you've heard from the zoning officer that your Cortlandt Street address was in fact in the IB zone, correct? Did you have any idea at that time that retail was not permitted in the IB zone at Cortlandt Street?
Yeah.
Okay, you did?
You mean?
And
I was
your
just
old
made aware.
location, did you know then
No,
that retail was not permitted there?
no.
Okay, all right. And you recall testifying back in March? Okay, at your testimony tonight, that when you moved to the present location, you had no knowledge that retail was not permitted? You sure you want to stay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Would it surprise you if my notes clearly recall you saying, with a big asterisk, that you had no expectation to sell retail when you moved into this location and that you knew that retail was not permitted? Do I need to get the transcript, or would you like to rethink your testimony tonight?
Pretty sure it was asked the same way and I answered it the same way.
Okay, well, we'll see about ordering the transcript. So, if I recall correctly, you opened, you did retail, and then you got caught. Okay, and then you stopped doing it, correct?
Right.
All right. Have you
I
done-
don't like the way you phrased it, Mr. Dusenberry.
Well,
The constructor, he got caught, he didn't think he was doing anything wrong, so he didn't think he got caught.
he was called on. How's
Okay,
Is that
that's
better?
fine.
All right. I certainly wouldn't want semantics to get in the way of things tonight. So, have you done any retail sales at all? Has anybody walked in and said to you, I want to buy something over the counter, since you were told not to do that?
They have.
And have you sold to them?
No.
Okay. Now, let's talk about how you have a huge warehouse, do you not?
Yes.
Like what, 19, 20,000 square feet?
19.
Okay. So, you've been there for 2 years operating your wholesale business actively. How full is that warehouse now? How much of it do you use actively?
To warehouse parts, most of them.
Okay, so it's full, I assume, of racks of parts and all sorts of things that your 7 drivers go out for 133 trips a day to deliver.
Right.
Okay. How do you get all that stuff in? All right? I assume it comes...
I object to the line of questioning.
Go ahead.
I didn't object to a board member.
Can I have your objection?
I didn't object to a board member, but Mr. Dusenberry has now developed a line of questioning that has to do with the permitted existing use. This is an application for 1,900 and some odd square feet to be used for retail use. Has nothing to do with the existing warehouse
Now, let me
application.
explain
Can I
something.
finish?
Yes, but I want to tell you something.
Let him finish.
If you're expanding a use that's not allowed from a use that is allowed, I think what he's trying to do is find out how much of the use that's allowed is currently
Can
being
you
used.
let him put on his case, though?
I'm letting him put on his case.
I don't
He's the
wanna-
one who made the objection.
I'm making an assumption. I want to hear his position and his position,
Go ahead.
not yours.
We have an application for 1,900 and some odd square feet of retail use. The warehouse use is a permitted use. That's not the issue before this board.
I understand.
And therefore, I don't think that's a relevant question.
I think it is.
Okay.
But
I overruled. Ask the question.
How many, okay,
Listen, I'm
Chairman,
not going to
let me just say one thing. There's a likelihood this case will be appealed.
Okay.
I think you should be a little careful about what you say.
Well, I'm just said I overruled because I believe if you have an existing use that's allowed, and now he's asking for use that's not allowed, technically, I believe he's saying, and I agree, that we have to know if the additional use would be a hardship on the zone.
Mr. Chairman, if I may supplement the record on behalf of my position on this.
Go ahead.
All right. Mr. Valano, I don't...
Yeah, my point is,
He's already ruled without listening to you, so it's over.
with all due respect to you and Mr. Gassion, it's not you and him, it's you and him. I just want to hear your position.
Well, I was going to give it.
But that's all I want. I don't want.
My position simply is that this application goes beyond the issue of retail versus wholesale. It also goes to the issue of other variances. You have variances dealing with loading zones and loading zone locations, inadequate parking. What will the conflict necessarily be between deliveries and retail people coming to the site, the use of the parking spaces? I wish to develop a record to show how he gets his delivery and where those deliveries come to the property, how they come, when they come, and whether or not there's going to be an impact on that use that's not permitted in the zone.
Which is exactly what...
Well, counsel,
Yeah, my suggestion would be this. I think you both have good points. Mr. Gassion is attempting to narrow this application to the 1,900 plus square foot. Your position is basically, let's look at everything, and there will be a point. I mean, I agree with the chair, I think we should proceed, but I think there's got to come a point when you need to get quickly to the issue of how what he wants to do or what the applicant wants to do is going to impact.
Well, don't forget, there are bulk variances.
I understand.
So I'm dealing with some underlying foundational material that deals with those
All right,
variances in
and
addition
I-
just to
All right,
retail use.
and subject to testimony later, it's my understanding at this point that those bulk variances are existing and they're not going to be exacerbated.
Loading zone
subject
is not
to-
existent.
No, I understand that, okay, subject to being later corrected. And one other point, my notes from March of 2018, I know you cross-examined the witness, and I have indicated that, and this is at March 1st, he said he stopped selling retail approximately 7 or 8 months ago. That would put us into late 2017, mid to late 2017. I don't know if that's consistent with what your point was going to
Yeah,
be.
my point was more the knowledge of retail and whether or not
All
it's
right.
permitted when he moved in.
Got it, okay. With that, try to,
I understand, I'm going to try not to be too far out in left field.
Good.
All right? If I ask a question, trust me that I have a reason for it. It may become relevant more or less later, but...
and the board's aware of the board's pretty savvy, they're aware of what's relevant and what's not.
I'm sure, and certainly I will be corrected by Mr.
Okay.
Gassion if necessary, wherever you get. All right, let's get back to the issue. You have a warehouse full of parts, all right? How many 53-foot trailers come to deliver parts to your site a month?
Very few. They usually get delivered by a box truck.
Okay, but you do get 53-foot trailers that come in and deliver?
once in a while.
Okay, and when a 53-footer, as we all know, that's the largest one that's made. All right, when that comes, where does it park?
Usually, they try to pull in the very back,
Okay.
and back in there.
So in the back of your site, you have an actual ramp and a loading dock.
Yes.
So they actually are able to negotiate and pull in there?
Hard to say, again, 53-foot trailers, probably not, again, we get so very few of those.
Mhm.
They usually, I've seen it once happen, they would park along the Portland Street, and usually it would be one pallet or so, because those carriers
All
do
right,
not.
do they ever pull into the parking lot and unload to the side door and on the park, adjacent to the parking lot?
No.
Okay. So when one parks in Cortland, or on the, in the loading ramp, does the tractor stick out into the road?
I've never seen it, so I
Okay,
couldn't
all
tell.
right. Let's talk about your box trucks. All right, where do they unload?
In the back.
All of them in the back?
Yeah.
All your deliveries for incoming parts are in the back on the loading ramp?
Not all the coming parts, because sometimes they come via van from our distribution
Okay.
center.
Now, picture the site with me, if you will, all right? You have your building on the right, parking lot on the left. In the back right side of the parking lot, is there not an entrance door there that goes into your warehouse? The shared entry, shared with the owner's space.
Okay, yeah, that's
Okay,
it.
do you use that for deliveries?
No,
Okay, you don't have much, that's fair. All right, how many box truck deliveries do you get a week?
a week. 4 or 5.
All right, and those all use the existing loading dock in the back?
Yes,
So if this board were to restrict any approval, if they were to give it to you for no loading up in the parking lot area or unloading, that would be okay?
absolutely.
Where do your vans that go out for deliveries get loaded up?
In the front. It's cars, not vans.
The delivery, your drivers drive cars out to deliver? Oh, okay, so those vehicles, whatever they might be, that go out to do your 133 deliveries a day, where do they get loaded?
Through the side.
Okay, so that's the side door I was referring to in the back right of the parking lot?
No, it's the one right by the sidewalk.
Okay, so it's more towards the front of the building.
Yeah.
All right, so, now, you control that parking lot presently, don't you? Because there's no retail traffic or people that come and go.
Correct.
All right, so if cars needed to be moved to get out of the way of the box truck, you have total control of that now, do you not?
We do.
Okay. Where are your dumpsters presently located?
All the way to the back of the building.
All right, down again by that ramp,
That ramp,
the loading ramp in the back.
all the way in the back, yes.
All right,
In that, whatever that is.
and is that dumpster area enclosed at all?
Currently, yes.
How is it enclosed? A chain link fence?
Chain.
And how high is the fence?
It's roughly, say, 6 feet.
Okay. The current parking lot in the front, is the front area all the way over to the side street to Cortland fully paved? Or is it half dirt and half paved?
So we went to Stevens Street.
Or Stevens Street, I'm sorry, I'm on the other side of the building, on Stevens Street. Is that fully paved? Or,
Mr. Dirt, yeah.
okay, roughly half and half?
Yeah.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Any other questions by members of the board?
Yeah, I was just wondering, for all our benefits, it would be advantageous, put a drawing out there. And-
Yes, I was gonna say that, but I didn't know how to interrupt anybody.
good.
I didn't want to get you upset.
There's a lot of,
You learn it. You can't be taught. Okay. So, yeah, I would like to have, if that would be
I
possible.
can have my engineer put a drawing up if you'd like.
Yeah, just,
That's
you
your
know,
question.
Yeah, that way we can understand what everybody's saying.
well, I think I have a
So
witness.
can the audience, by the way.
You know, is that okay with you?
That's fine.
This way everybody can kind of.
And you know what, it probably would have been a smart thing to do up front so I could have a point to the area.
Right, I mean, I think it would help everybody.
All right. For the record, Michael, is that the same plan
What's placed on the board is the boundary and topographic survey.
Well, should we
Well,
identify Michael or
Yes.
something?
yeah, why don't we do that? If you could state your name and spell your last name, please.
J. Michael Petrie, Petry.
With regard to this application, you must swear that the testimony that you will give shall be the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Bob, why don't you bring him through the paces on that?
In order to make it more facile for the board to understand Mr. Duesenberg's questions, can you just briefly describe the existing site?
Yes, and if you'll lend me a pen, because I left it in my briefcase, I'll mark this A1 for the record. A2 for the record? Okay. With today's date, 1/4/19, gotta remember that. Thank you, George. What's been marked A2?
1-3.
1-3, 1-3, today's 1-3, I just realized.
1-3.
Sorry about that.
Mine is, you don't want to give up.
Not me.
About the year.
I have great dinner plans for tomorrow night, so I'm really excited. That's why I'm jumping ahead of that. I apologize to the board. What's been marked A2 for the record is a boundary and topographic survey that was submitted as part of this application. And the way it's oriented on the board, Rutgers Street is on your right. Stevens is at the bottom of the drawing, Cortlandt Street at the top of the drawing. The Parks Authority portion of the building is the long rectangular portion that runs along Cortlandt Street and ends at the corner of Rutgers. The portion of the building that is occupied by the owner of the property is the portion that fronts on Stevens. That's this L-shaped building that's here.
Michael, excuse me. Bob, I don't think we've qualified him as anything yet. And I'm familiar with Mr. Petrie, but you may want to put on the record
Okay,
so
well,
we know who's
Qualification.
at this point, I thought it was just describing that.
I
but-
wanted to know that he's an engineer.
Okay, Michael, would you, to make it easy, just review your qualifications, please?
Certainly.
And obviously, you're testifying both as an engineer and a planner in this matter. So review the qualifications for both of you.
Thank you. I have a bachelor's degree in architecture, which I obtained from New Jersey Institute of Technology in 1984. I have been licensed as a professional engineer since 1992. I've been licensed as a professional planner since 1994 by virtue of examination. I am registered as an architect since, I believe, 1995. My licenses are all in good standing. I serve as principal in the firm of Petrie Engineering. We're located in Fairfield, New Jersey. I have appeared before planning and zoning boards as both an engineer and planner on probably hundreds of occasions, including this board
Make
for
a
Valley
motion
National
to
Bank.
accept.
I have no problem.
Thank
Any
you, Mr.
objection? No objection.
So if we're going to consider him qualified, he's being qualified not as an architect, but as an engineer and a planner.
Correct.
Yes.
And the board has accepted those qualifications. Thank you. Michael, continue.
Without
Yeah.
objection, by the way, Mr. Petrie is eminently qualified.
Thank you.
Well, everybody's happy.
Happy might not be the word.
Get it fine.
That'll fade quickly, yeah.
See how long it lasts.
So the L-shaped building that fronts on Stevens Street is the building that is occupied by the owner. The area, the rectangular area immediately to the east of the Parks Authority building, this is the area that serves as the parking lot. As was pointed out, about a little bit more than half of that area is paved. The other half is gravel with grass growing through it. There is a tree located in that parking lot. There are two separate loading areas on the property. One that is accessed off of Stevens Street that services the owner's building, and a second area that's accessed off of Cortlandt Street that services the Parks Authority building.
I'd like to limit the questions to the engineer at this point. He's described it,
Right.
and I'd rather go on with the architect if I could.
Well, if I could, before we move on,
Yes, Mr. Milano?
I'd like to have your witness here, along with the attorney, just rehash where the 18-wheeler was, where the cars,
The dumpster, yeah.
dumpsters,
One,
those kind of
two,
things.
go in there.
Would that be okay with you both?
Yeah, why don't you
Go
go out
inside.
front? Go out this way.
Yeah, you can
Go out
come
the
inside.
front.
Why, you
Here.
can come in front, come on.
Go out the front. Thank you.
Who's on first?
Musical chair.
I just want,
Okay.
if we could do that,
All right, I asked you to point out the loading
loading area in the right rear, and that would be off of Cortlandt Street. There you go. That's the loading area that you presently use for all your incoming deliveries.
Yes.
All right,
And
would
that's
you
for the
point-
box trucks.
That would be the box trucks, he said, as well as the tractor trailers.
So how's
And again, tractor trailers, he said, on rare occasions, just so we
So how-
understand.
How would they?
Rare occasions or once a month?
I thought he said one time, period, but
I said, I said probably once a month,
once a month.
yeah.
I stand corrected.
So, how would they access that parking? Start with the tractor trailer and then go to the box trucks.
So the tractor trailer, when I did see it, was parked right here, right along the side of Cortlandt Street. And usually it would be a pallet or so, it would be gone momentarily.
Okay, the box trucks, how do they access?
They back into this area right here.
Okay, and your loading dock, ramps, whatever you want to call it, what is that?
Well, I think what Mr. Dusenberry was referring to, there was a door here which we don't use, is that correct?
Well, that was one door I referred to in the back right. It's a shared entrance with your landlord.
Correct.
And then there's another side door, if you point to that, and that's where you said the product comes out of the premises into your deliveries.
Yep.
Into what? Trucks,
In-
vans,
Say
cars?
cars.
So,
Because,
are you telling me, I want to make sure I'm clear on that, are you telling me if I have an axle, you put it into a car?
yes, axles are probably no longer than this table.
So you don't use vans or nothing like that?
We use one van for returns, but it leaves in the morning and comes back at night.
Your delivery is by car, is that your
Yes.
testimony? No, no, no.
All right, so there is, I think you described also a loading ramp where you bring stuff into the building. Is that located back off of Cortlandt Street as well?
Right here.
I think that orients people as far as I'm concerned.
Can I ask a question, now that we have the dining room? As far as the cars that do the deliveries, are they the cars of the employees or are they company cars?
About 5 of those are company cars. 2 of them are contracted drivers, which are employee cars, of the contracting company.
Is there any pickups involved?
Pickup trucks?
Yes.
No.
No.
That helps me.
Do you know what type of cars are used?
You mostly have hybrids, right?
No, Nissan Versus. Nissan Versus,
The small
no,
cars, right?
very
I've
small
seen
cars.
The SUVs?
No,
No.
No,
they're
it's
little
not.
hatchbacks.
Small cars,
Little
small
hatchbacks.
compact
Okay.
cars.
That helps.
Now, are cars able to park even on that, there's the paved parking part. Are cars also able to park on the part that's not paved?
We currently do that.
You currently do that?
Yep.
Okay.
I have no further questions.
Any other questions by members of the board, now that we have this enlightenment?
I have a question. You said that the 18-wheeler, if you will, when they make the delivery, they park on the side of that road. Do you know how they get there? What entrance they use to get there? Is it Rutgers? Is it the back street? Do you know? You're not sure.
I'm not sure. I just know whenever they do pull up, they end up on this side, right next, adjacent to the building.
Facing Rutgers?
Yes,
And there is a side opening on the side of the building.
there is,
Remember.
but we don't really use that. Once in a while we would. We usually use this area right here.
They come all the way around? I mean, what happens is you have whatever it is to.
We have forklifts,
Forklifts, okay. All right.
a forklift.
The forklift is out on the sidewalk?
No, it's inside the building. It's
Or
parked
it's inside the building?
It comes out onto the street, and that's how they
It comes
unload
out,
the
I would
tractor
imagine.
trailer.
I would imagine it comes out onto the street to access the tractor trailer.
Correct.
Picks up the pallet and drives it into the.
Correct.
Correct?
If I might, this has been used as that for years. This
Oh,
was
yes.
Vacuum Max, they used to
Yes.
park trailers there every single day.
Yes, that's true.
Every day there was trailers there. I worked in town 28 years. If I see one trailer there in a month, it's a lot.
I mean, anybody else? I wanted to see it myself.
No, I've seen trailers there.
No,
that's
I
what I'm
want to
saying.
see it.
Like he said. Rare though.
Okay.
If I might also, Vacuum Max used to have very large equipment going in there. I mean, it was very large. I mean, it was sometimes hours out there with the
Yeah,
trucks.
huge stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a very minor use of it. It used to be.
Less intense, you said.
Less, much less.
Any other members of the public wish to ask questions based upon now we have this clarification diagram? None by members of the public. Okay, Mr. Gassion, you can call your next witness then.
Mr. Cosarelli.
Mr. Cosarelli, when you're ready, could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Robert Cozzarelli, that's C-O-Z-Z-A-R-E-L-L-I.
Could you raise your right hand, please? With regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. It's all yours.
Mr. Cosarelli, what's your business address
Business address is 187 Washington Avenue, Rutgers.
and your occupation?
I'm an architect.
And how long have you been practicing in the field of architecture?
Opened my practice in 1986, graduated in 1979.
And from what school did you graduate and what degree did you obtain?
New Jersey Institute of Technology, it's a Bachelor of Architecture degree.
Have you testified before zoning boards and planning?
Yes, I am.
Have you testified before this board on numerous occasions?
Many times.
Mr. Cosarelli is an expert. As long as he didn't lose his license, he's definitely an expert. He's been here numerous times.
Mr. Cosarelli, obviously you heard the engineer describe the site. Would you describe the existing, generally describe the existing structure on the site? Obviously, not with great detail, the only thing you have to describe with great detail will be the 1,970 square feet.
Right. We were asked to, prepare drawings of this building, so we documented the existing conditions.
And you're referring to A2.
A2, I'm sorry, well, it's my A1, you want to call this A2?
You have to move a little bit to the left
Yeah.
because you're blocking the whole thing. Thank you.
Call it A3?
Yeah, it's not A2.
It's A3.
He's saying it's A2.
So generally describe the existing structure.
Yes. Existing structure is predominantly a warehouse building. The warehouse area is 19,951 square feet, which is pretty much all this area that's occupied by Ports Authority. The front of the area of the 1,970 square feet is what we're talking about to convert to retail.
And can you describe what changes will be made should this application be approved to that 1,970 square feet?
They're all interior alterations and renovations that are happening to this building. If you look at the drawing, there's some dashed lines, dotted lines, and that's what's being removed. And that was done, and you'll see on the next drawing why we did that, but it was predominantly to open up the area, for this proposed retail area.
Will there be any increase in square footage should this application be
No.
approved? And will there be any changes to the exterior should this application be approved?
No changes to the exterior.
I have no further questions of this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions by members of the board?
So they have an opening at this location on Rutgers currently. There's a way to enter this place from Rutgers itself.
Yes, there's a front door entrance.
There's a front door entrance.
Yes.
And that front door entrance is not going to be changed.
No. There was, someone just meant, there was a side door entrance that was added off the parking lot as well.
So people could enter the establishment from the side as well.
That was added, yes.
That was added.
And I assume the customers will be coming into that parking lot that's currently there.
Yeah. Park there, they're gonna walk in that direction to the door.
Any other questions, Mr. Lopez?
No. Thank you.
Any other questions by members of the board?
Just one.
Wow.
There's no additional square footage that could be added on to this, right?
No, we're We're
That's
not, this is, the way the building is presented now, the footprint of the building, that's the way it's, the intention is for it to remain like that.
right, but I'm saying, is there additional space that's not being used that could be added to it in any way?
Not without a variance, no. No.
No, I'm saying, is there available square footage within the building that were not shown here?
No.
Okay, that's it. I guess what- The answer is no. Right? That's the question. I have no from him, but the
I'm
notes.
sorry, I'm confused by your question.
Is there any additional square footage I have not been in the building that could be opened up to add to that storage space?
To add to the front area.
Anyway,
This is,
is the building maxed out?
yes, it's
That's-
maxed out.
It's a simple question.
Yeah,
It's really not hard. It's not trick. It's a
That's
legitimate
it, it's
question.
maxed
for
out,
the
it's all
record.
warehouse or
Because
retail.
many times people will come back and say, you know, well, he's starting here and he's gonna end up here. I wanna know now that this particular space is being maxed out. So whatever we approve, we maxed out the space.
It's maxed out.
That's the
Obviously,
question.
the architect has to answer that, not the attorney.
Not a trick question, just come on my basis, making sure I know the whole concept. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Milano?
No.
I have a question. The parking lot here, if you were to put asphalt the whole area.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I specifically didn't ask him about the parking lot because that's going to be testified to
By
by
the
the
engineer? All right, I'll wait, I have no problem. Mr. Dusenberry, you have any questions?
Yeah, just to follow up on Mr. Valano's question. You talked about the maxing out of the applicant space or the Parks Authority space. What about the owner's space? Do you know what that's used for?
The owner's space is similar in nature.
We identify, first of all,
Yes,
identify the owner's
The owner-
section of the building.
It's this part of the building here. The Parks Authority is very rectangular, and the owner's part is almost a square attached to the long linear part of the building.
Okay, and just so we can all be familiar with the access points. The owner's section has an access point on Stephen.
That's
And it has another side door, I guess that would be the southerly side if I'm not mistaken.
correct.
All right, and then it has a shared entrance with the
There's-
Ports Authority space.
There's an entrance here that's,
And you can go in and then either go into Parts Authority, Parts Authority.
Yes.
Parts Authority.
Yes, you can.
And, or go up and into the owner's space.
correct.
All right. And then we have the side door, and that shared entrance is off the parking lot, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and then we have a side door directly off the parking lot, up towards the front. Then we have a main entrance in the center.
Correct.
Do we have any more entrances down on Cortlandt?
There's a door on the side, on the Portland side, there's an entrance here. There's another entrance door here, and there's actually a garage door at this location.
All right, and now, describe for me the ramp in the back. I'm a little unclear about elevations. So when a delivery truck comes to the rear, the section has been well identified as this location on Cortlandt. The ramp brings goods up to grade, up to the first floor level?
This portion of the building is at grade. If
Okay.
you notice within the building, there's ramps. So
Okay.
there's a ramp at this location on here, and then...
Okay, so basically the three sections step down
Correct.
towards the rear loading area.
Yes.
So once you get up the ramp into the building, you've got ramps internally.
Correct.
Okay, so that the forklifts can move around without
Yes.
obstruction. All right, now I understand how those things work. All right, do you know whether or not the owner's space is fully utilized? To answer Mr. Valano's question about maxing out the space.
I object, again.
If he
I don't
knows.
see what relevance that has to this application.
Well, I think the relevance is, the board has a right to know the intensity of the uses on the site and how those intensities will affect the variances dealing with parking, and whether or not you've got all the information you need. Let's assume only 25% of the owner's space was actively being used, and an application came in to fill that space. That changes the whole dynamic of the parking lot variances, which are already severe. So I think it's relevant.
I don't. The only difference between the parking requirement with this application and the parking requirement without the application is one parking space.
I disagree with that number, but that's a different issue. I think Mr. Valano's question was well posed, and that is this site going to function fully as you hear it tonight through the testimony of the witnesses, or isn't it? Because the ability to deal with the parking variances that are sought, when 47 are required and only 15 are provided, is enormous. And if there's more use to be made of this space, let's find out about now. I mean, the owners testified on March 1st. They can say whether or not they're fully utilizing their space or not. And look, we had the problem in March of ignoring that space and ignoring its impact on everything that was presented. And that's the very issue I'm dealing with right now.
In other words, what you're saying is it could affect the negative criteria.
Yeah.
The parking requirement is based on the square footage. My understanding is it's completely used. But whether it's completely used or not, it's based on the square footage. It's not based on the amount of use.
Square footage is square footage.
It's not being changed.
You take that, bro. But I'm saying that when there are variances, you're entitled to understand the full way the site
Let
works.
me ask Mr. Di Lorenzo and Mr. Hurwitz, maybe to resolve this. Mr. Di Lorenzo and Mr. Hurwitz, is there a different square footage calculation for commercial use or retail use compared to industrial use or warehouse use?
Well, you're talking about retail, parking, and warehouse.
Yes.
Yes.
And that amounts to, in my expert's opinion, one additional parking space being required.
What do you say, Mr. Hurwitz?
I'm looking right now.
It's one space for every 400 on the warehousing and one space for every 600 square feet, I believe.
The reverse.
The other way around.
Now let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Any part of the warehousing that is now being given up for the retail,
Yep.
doesn't that part come off the warehousing calculation?
It did.
But
It
now
did-
it comes
it did
and
with the
adds to
application.
And
where-
that's how I come up with
Yeah.
the one space, or my engineer comes up with one space.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask him, Mr. Hurwitz then. He's our engineer.
Okay, so you have, if you take the whole building, warehouse, 1 per 600, so, if you take my calculator back.
Yes, go ahead.
What was it, 19,
1990.
nope, 951?
That does not include the orange space.
Yes, 19,951.
So it's 33.
I come up with 33.
My engineer would be happy to give his calculation so we don't spin our wheels.
Should we wait for that testimony?
Well, but the questions are
Well,
being asked, so
I think
I
we
mean,
need
I'd
to
rather wait, but
All right, we need to keep in mind, to me, it sounds like more of a planning question, going to the negative criteria. And we have to keep in mind that the test here is not the impact of the site on the applicant, it's the impact of what the applicant wants to do, this application on the remainder of the site. I don't want to spin it around. And I think my feeling is that we can best get to that through planning testimony when it gets to, what is the impact of what the applicant wants to do, if any, on the rest of the property or on the neighborhood, the normal stuff that we
And to be
hear.
clear on my question was, are we, the space that is available to this applicant, are we using it all? And the answer I thought was, yes. I didn't ask anything about the owner because that's not part of the application. At least what my thinking was, I wanted to know if they are using all their available space. Because as you know, businesses grow.
I think the answer was
And the way
yes. from what
I
heard.
asked the architect, so I don't want to be misunderstood what I said was, are they using all the space that they're presently renting? And the answer was yes. That's my question. To be clear for my colleagues.
Mr. Chairman, at the jeopardy of jousting with a windmill, I will say that I'll wait and ask more of the engineer planners.
I also want to point something out from Mr. Hurwitz's report. In Mr. Hurwitz's report, it's actually saying, although this is pre-existing, the amount of parking spaces are, I believe, 32 negative. So you need another 32 spaces to comply with everything. That's based on his report, unless I'm reading it.
Well, I don't disagree with that.
47 and
Okay.
15.
I'm just going, to enlighten things to try and...
My point was completely different. The change is one space. That's all.
From the original
So I
applicant.
think his argument is technically whether it's currently being overutilized or not. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth.
You are a little bit, but it's okay.
You think you learn.
You were questioning,
I said I had no further question, because if I go any farther, I'm jousting
So
with
we're done with
Lou.
this?
I think that's a better,
Any more questions by the board of Mr. Cosarelli?
I have just one question. I don't think it's been addressed yet. What is the owner's use? What, I brought my list of where it goes.
You have a license? You're asking about this area.
What is this?
It's warehouse, this is also used as warehouse.
Warehouse.
The same, it's the same kind of use as the Parks Authority. It's all warehouse and you have some office space.
But it's warehousing for something other than oil parks.
Yes.
I have a question, I apologize.
Gotta ask this question. Does the owner do any retail sales?
No.
Any members of the public have any questions of Mr. Cosarelli based upon his testimony? No. Mr. Gassion, we are going to take, I will, why?
Actually, hold on,
Anybody have a question?
I have a question.
All right, let's
Sorry.
get your question, I want to get done with the witness.
I have a question. The sales counter, which is up in the front there, what's directly behind that?
What's that? I'm sorry?
The room behind the sales counter, what is that? What does it hold?
This is a corridor and there's restrooms behind here.
And what's the room behind there? That big room right behind that wall, that one?
This one, it's a break room.
No, the big one.
This,
Yes.
it's existing storage area.
It's an existing storage area.
Yeah. It's where all the shelving will be.
So if their sales were to grow, would they move that back to make the front bigger? Is that a possibility, given that it's just storage?
They can't legally move that after the approval's been granted.
Yeah.
Any other questions by members of the board? I think that's later. You're not doing landscaping on this, are you? Is that
No.
part of your testimony? No.
Interior.
That's what I do. I want to make sure, just want to make sure, because I don't have to call them back. Okay, anything else? Anybody?
Just one follow-up, what Mr. Lopez was asking. If we approve this project as presented, these walls stay as is. This is not something that could be changed after the
These
fact
walls,
by our
no, these walls
construction
stay.
office.
Actually, there's structural.
There's still storage.
Yeah, all the other partitions that we're taking out, they're non-load bearing.
Any other questions by members of the board? Okay, we will take a 10-minute recess, and we will reconvene at 8:30.
Before you do that, Mr. Chairman, when do you stop testimony, is my question? 10 o'clock, is that what you're talking about?
New testimony,
9:30?
9:30, new testimony. If somebody's on, it goes.
If somebody's on, we go past 9:30. If you call another witness, it's done.
Do you consider the engineer versus the planner to do
Nice try. Yes.
All right, so we have an adjournment for 10 minutes. Well, not adjournment, a recess. 10-minute recess. Regular meeting of the Belleville Township Zoning Board of Adjustment for January 3rd, 2019. We'll now go back into session. Mr. Gassion, I believe you were calling your next witness, your engineer, I believe?
Yes, I'd like to call Mr. Petrie, and I'm sure you recall that he stepped up to the podium
Yes.
earlier
To
and
explain
was qualified
something.
as both an engineer and a planner, so that
So
he
we
could
don't have
review
to
the
re-swear
site
him in.
plan and further.
Right, we don't have to re-swear him in either. 'Cause we
So
swore him
then
in
I'm
already.
going to commence with Mr. Petrie
Okay.
and start asking him questions if that's permissible.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Petrie, would you please review the location of the property? And even though you described before, for the record, I'd like you to do it again.
Okay.
Is this A2?
This is what's been marked A2, the boundary and topographic survey.
Cameras on? Cameras good? Thank you.
And I raised it up a little bit because I need to stand here and you need to see it.
Can you turn it a little this way so the public can see it too? I don't like the public saying they can't see it. Yeah, perfect, that's it, good.
How's that? We still good? This is on the table, okay. The property in question is designated as lots 2, 3, 4, and 5 in block 9402. It is commonly known as 37 Rutgers Street. It's located at the intersection of Rutgers, which again is on the right side of the board, Cortland, which is on the top of the board, and Stevens, which is on the bottom of the board. North is to the right on this plan, so south to the left, east is to the bottom, and west is to the top.
Could you give the exact dimensions? Because it's not the whole block.
Yes, the property itself is 177.70 feet of frontage along Rutgers. It has 307.03 feet along Cortland. It has 188 feet along Stevens, and there's a jog that is 90 feet coming off of Stevens and 118 feet going out to the most southerly portion of the property, 77.79 feet coming back into Cortland. So it's an L-shaped property, looking
So
like
that little area to the left of the land, no. Go to the landlord's property, where he's using his portion. That little area is being used by the landlord?
That is correct.
Okay.
That area is actually serving as the landlord's loading area, and the landlord and his people actually park there
Okay.
for their use.
So they park separate from the parts authority?
They do.
Okay.
We didn't count those parking spaces in our parking count because they're not striped spaces. But that is historically how they utilize this property.
Okay. And the landlord's portion of the building is not used in any of the calculations, am I correct?
That is not correct, actually. We calculated the landlord's space into the parking requirement for the entire site because the building is on the property. So when we analyzed parking for the property, and that was one of the questions that came up earlier, we looked at the entire site, not the 19,000. We actually looked at, there's 27,106 square feet of building total on the property. When you look at the parking calculation in the existing condition at one space for every 600 square feet, the requirement is 45.18 spaces, so 46 spaces is the requirement by ordinance. When you break it down by the proposed uses, there's 25,136 square feet of warehouse space, which requires 41.893 parking spaces, and 1,970 square feet of retail space, which at 1 to 400 requires 4.925 parking spaces, for a total of 46.82 spaces, 47. So there's a difference from existing to proposed requirement of one space because of rounding.
Let's go back.
And I got off a track, but it talked about the overall building square footage, and I wanted to get that on the record.
You just reviewed the location of the property. What's the zoning at the site? Everyone knows, but repeated it.
This property is zoned industrial, and it's in the IB zone, and it is located within the valley.
And again, you've already described the existing site, but just so you don't miss anything, is there anything else you need to say about the existing site?
Well, there was discussion about the parking area, so let me hit on that. This existing parking area, that is approximately 12,000 square feet of bituminous in that parking area, and there's about 3,500 square feet of gravel area in that parking area. They do park on the gravel today, I'll tell you, but if you looked at the paved parking area for what may have come at some point before a board as a parking lot, this area here, in accordance with the ordinance, can accommodate 10 parking stalls, the bituminous area. There's a driveway off of Rutgers that comes straight in along the building. You could park 10 spaces, 90 degrees, and have appropriate backup for those spaces without hitting the building in accordance with your ordinance. So the paved area could accommodate 10,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
On this plan that I have, that says it was revised, the last revision was 11/2018. I just counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
You're looking, Mr. Chairman, you're looking at Mr.
22.
Cosarelli's plan.
Yes.
You're not looking at the site plan by the engineer. You need to look at the site plan by the engineer.
So what we're saying is this one is wrong, the 22
Well, I
parking
think it's just
spaces?
a general depiction. He did not do the site plan.
He's saying that area is 55 by 100. And he's saying just in the area that's covered, that there's 22 parking spaces.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think what you're looking at is the architect's original site plan.
Right.
What I'm talking about is the existing condition. And I'm going to mark on A2 what that bituminous area is, so that it's quite clear to the board what it is.
Yeah.
What I'm outlining here
That's it.
in blue is the paved parking area. That area today this is a 20 scale plan. That area today is 52 feet wide and it's 95 feet long. So in 52 feet, you could almost have a 19-foot stall and a 24-foot backup. And in 95 feet, you could have 10 9-foot wide spaces per your ordinance. So if one were to have to park that today in accordance with your ordinance, the parking would look something like this. And there'd be an area here that you couldn't park in because it was only 5 feet wide. So if you parked that area in accordance with your, and the driveway's right here today, so if you'd come in and you'd pull head in into those spaces, and that would be as close to your ordinance as I could get this parking lot to work. And that's 10 spaces. That's the existing condition.
Right.
If you were to pave the other one.
Right.
So
If you were to pave the other portion of it.
So we did that, that's what our site, that's what we're gonna talk about when we go on our proposed site.
Okay, and that's showing a total of what, 15?
Yeah. The existing is 10, and the proposed is 15.
And would you review the proposed?
Yes, so going to the layout sheet, which is SP2 in your set, and I'm marking this A4,
I believe.
A4.
Yes.
Haven't blown in 2019 yet. We have the driveway in generally the same location, but we've widened that driveway so that it can accommodate two-way traffic. In its current condition, it's 17 feet wide, and in its proposed condition, it's 27 feet wide. So we have 24 and a flare to 27, so that we can accommodate two-way movements in and out of that driveway. Now, we've maintained the drive aisle against the building, and we've paved the gravel area as well. So we now have a total of 15 parking spaces, including one handicap space within this lot. There's two-way ingress and egress along the building. There's a one-way drive aisle that comes along the paved portion that's abutting the owner's portion of the building, and there's a two-way drive aisle down the Stevens Street side, a single-way drive back out. So we have circulation where it's now in the existing condition. In the existing condition, it is a dead-end aisle. Here we have circulation. And we have not parked within 5 feet of the right-of-way line, which is what your ordinance limits us to. It says you can't park within 5 feet of the right-of-way. So I couldn't park it a different way and get more parking. This way is the most practical with appropriate circulation. The applicant with this parking is proposing to take this front portion of the building that was described by the architect and create retail space in that portion of the existing warehouse building. The as I indicated in my earlier discussions, the parking requirement for the property goes up by 1 space. So we've increased parking from 10 conforming spaces to 15 conforming spaces, and we've increased our requirement by 1. Yet we still need a parking variance.
Would you please review the existing landscaping?
Certainly. When you go back to the A2 sheet in the set, the boundary and topographic survey, you'll see that within the property itself, there is 1 tree. It's located within the gravel area right at the end of the existing bituminous parking area within the gravel area. That's what's located on the site.
That would be eliminated?
That would be eliminated in the proposed condition.
And would you describe any proposed landscaping on the new plan or changes to the landscaping?
Certainly. I'm going to refer to the landscape and lighting plan that's in your set as SP4. And this has been colored up for
A5.
clarity. I'm marking it A5 with today's date. The proposed plan incorporates landscaping at the perimeter of the parking lot. In fact, there's 7 Norway spruces at that perimeter to provide screening of this parking from the public roadways.
Can you review the existing drainage?
Certainly. Going back again to A2, the existing parking lot and gravel area have no drainage within them. They actually sheet flow out to Stevens, and they run down Stevens probably to the drainage system down near the intersection of Belleville. There is no drainage that picks this up along the street frontage until you get down beyond the limits of this site. So everything that comes off of the existing parking lot sheet flows across the sidewalk on Stevens and into the street.
Now, I believe probably in Mr. Hurd's first report, he talked about a drainage plan.
Yes.
Have you submitted a drainage plan, and would you review the changes as a result of that plan?
Certainly. What I'm going to mark as A6 is the grading and drainage plan, which is SP3 in your set. Within that parking area, our intention is to maintain the same drainage pattern. However, we are curbing the parking lot so that we can collect the drainage within that parking lot and put it into a drainage system. That system is located in the southeasterly corner of the parking lot. There's a type A inlet. That type A inlet will collect the water from about 4,122 square feet of paved area. There are 2 90-foot lengths of 10-inch ductile iron pipe that connect into an outlet structure. That outlet structure discharges into the inlet at the corner of Rutgers and Stevens. The detention system, and that's what it is, consists of a total of 102 cubic feet of storage area in those pipes. It will capture the water and it will discharge it slowly through an orifice in the outlet structure into the drainage system. So it reduces the amount of water that runs out and across the street. There is a depressed curb at this location. In an overflow situation, your ordinance requires us to design for a storm of intensity of not less than 2.6 inches per hour, based upon your section 20-1.6 design standard letter I. That portion of the ordinance is in your design regulations. So we have an overflow when this system fills, so that the system will, when it doesn't discharge or when it fills beyond the discharge point, beyond the capacity that's required by your ordinance, it will sheet flow across the sidewalk and back in the same direction where it always has. but we believe we've designed the system in accordance with your ordinance.
Mr. Harris, you have anything to say about that?
I have a question. So, that's from this report here.
That is correct.
That's, Mr. Hurd, you saw this report?
Yes,
So, and I guess it basically talks about drainage time, about 84 minutes, something like that.
Yes.
Okay. That's all, but make sure you're okay with that, right?
You have no problem with the report then?
Correct. No flooding in the area?
I was always floating in the valley, but he's reducing it to, he's collecting it and then he's slowly outletting it into the existing drainage system on Rutgers Street.
So you're saying it would be better than it was now
It
currently?
should be equal to, he's increasing the amount of impervious coverage, so that he's addressing that situation.
So he's offsetting?
Yes.
That's when the 84 minutes comes in.
Well, it's just type of concentration, yeah.
Would you review the lighting plan?
Certainly. Going back to what's been marked A5, the method to provide safety for both the patrons and the employees of Parks Authority, we've incorporated a single light pole that's 20 feet high with a dual fixture LED light on top of that pole. That pole will have an average illumination level of 1.7 foot candles over the entire parking area. It has a minimum lighting level of a half a foot candle within that parking area. Since this is an LED fixture, it is both highly energy efficient and it does not have the hot spots that the older types of fixtures have. In fact, the maximum lighting level in the parking area is only 3.6 foot candles. So we're going from a high of 3.6 to a low of a half, and the spillage doesn't affect any of the neighboring properties whatsoever.
We've gone back and forth, we've talked about the parking extensively, but just to make sure everything's covered, would you review the ingress and egress?
Certainly. The ingress and egress is through a driveway that's immediately to the east of the building, right where that side entrance is. You'll see that on all of the plans, including A5, there's a walkway along the building that has a handicap ramp and access to that door that was added for Mr. Cosarelli's testimony. So the driveway comes in adjacent to that walkway. That walkway is behind a curb, so patrons on that walkway and employees on that walkway are protected from traffic. There's a 24-foot wide drive aisle, and that access way is greater than 70 feet from the intersection. So the industry standard is to keep a minimum of 50. This is a minimum of 70, 75 from the closest curb line. So we're separated appropriately from Stevens, we're separated appropriately from Cortland, we're roughly mid-block, so it is the safest place for a driveway, and it's designed for two-way traffic in terms of both the curb cut and the driveway throat width.
Now, again, you've talked about ingress and egress, and we now clarified it completely. You've talked about parking. Again, just review the parking to make sure the record is clear.
Certainly. And referring to A4, which is the layout sheet, there's a 24-foot wide drive aisle. There are a total of 15 spaces, an odd number, so we have 6 standard spaces, 1 handicap space closest to the building, so for a total of 7, and on the opposite side we have a total of 8. All of the parking stalls are 9 by 19. The backup drive aisles are 24. The parking lot itself is curbed. The one-way drive aisles at the end are 14 feet, and that is at the end of each drive lane, and the parking itself has been fully curbed so that we have a contained parking area. The new layout will be both safer and more aesthetically appealing than the existing condition. The parking lot will also provide for an accessible entrance to Parks Authority and handicap parking, ADA parking that does not exist today, so it brings more in compliance with the ADA standards. And finally, the
proposed improvements disturb less than an acre of land and do not increase impervious by more than a quarter of an acre. Therefore, it's not considered a major development according to your ordinance. And as Mr. Harris points out, we don't need to do reductions, but we need to maintain the existing drainage runoff patterns, which we have done with the report that we've submitted.
And although Mr. Harris said you've maintained it, you substantially improved it, have you not, the drainage plan? It was a non-existent sheet flow circumstance.
It's non-existent sheet flow, and as everybody knows, sheet flow, especially in winter, is a dangerous thing, because we have sheet flow across a public sidewalk. So we have, potential slip and fall along this frontage where all this water is coming, and that gets dramatically improved with this proposed system.
And are there bulk violations connected with the site and structure?
Yes, as was pointed out early on, the existing buildings do not comply with the setback requirements. There are 3 street frontages, none of them meet the front yard setbacks of those street frontages. There's a rear yard requirement, and we do not meet the rear yard requirement. The existing building coverage exceeds what's allowable by zone, but we're not changing that. The one loading area that's located servicing the owner's building is undersized in terms of the requirements set forth in your ordinance for loading size. And finally, the existing parking is deficient from what is required by code, regardless of how they park it. And while it's not striped, as I indicated, the most logical paved parking layout would accommodate a total of 10 spaces where 46 are required.
So you've reviewed bulk violations, most of which are pre-existing. Therefore, can you now review what variances are being requested?
Certainly. And I'm going to stick with this plan. I think the client is seeking a D1 variance to permit the front portion of the building to be utilized as vehicular retail parts use, which is not a permitted use in the IB industrial zone. We are also seeking a C2 variance for parking. I'm going to start with the parking variance and work backwards. It's important to note that, as I said, the existing condition, the overall site requires a total of 46 parking spaces, and based upon what is out there today, there are a total of 10 spaces per your ordinance that meet the requirements there. And that's based upon a requirement of 1 for every 600 square feet of the overall building, including the owner's unit. In the proposed condition, the 1,980 square feet of building that changes from 1 to 600 to 1 to 400, that drives the total parking requirement to 47 spaces. Therefore, based upon the ordinance, the parking requirement increases by 1 stall. I believe that we've maximized the compliant parking in this area, providing 14 perpendicular parking stalls and 1 handicap stall, while providing for appropriate circulation on the lot and an appropriate point of ingress and egress for the property. I'll also note that none of the stalls that are proposed here encroach on the 5-foot setback that's required by your ordinance. In the existing conditions, there's no striping in the bituminous parking lot, and the paved area doesn't allow for anything other than dead-end parking arrangement. It further allows for parking within the setbacks, which is in direct conflict with your ordinance. In addition, the elimination of the dead-end parking will further reduce the potential for vehicles being backed out into Rutgers Street when the lot is full. The new layout provides for an easy maneuvering into and out of the parking lot as set forth in your ordinance. It's important to note that the proposed lot allows for 5 more parking stalls than the existing paved parking lot, so we're providing something here that is closer to conformance with your ordinance than what exists today. Overall, the parking lot has been vastly improved and has space utilized to the maximum extent possible to allow for the most parking stalls within the setback requirements. If the need arises, both Cortlandt and Stevens Streets allow for on-street parking that can be utilized in an overflow condition. With this, I offer that the variance for the reduced number of parking stalls can be granted based upon the intent and purpose of the municipal land use law, letter H, which encourages the location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic. I offer that the proposed condition vastly improve movements into and out of the site, as well as movements on site.
Excuse me a minute, but I hear we're now getting to planning conclusions and planning testimony. Is that the intent of the board, to not separate the two issues?
What he's doing, both.
Well, okay, so it's fine, just as long as I understand we're doing it as a lump sum rather than do engineering and then talk about planning.
Mr. Gassion, you have no problem with that one?
I don't, but if Mr. Dusenberry wants to ask questions about engineering before we go further with the planning, I have no objection.
If he's done with his engineering, I'd like to stay with engineering and ask questions about it if I could.
Bless you. If you have no objection, I have no problem. All right, so let's go to the engineering.
So obviously, he started the planning testimony. We can go back on the planning testimony and rehash it once the questions with regard to engineering.
Well, he hasn't gotten far into it, so, you know.
Right, exactly.
If I
Are
may.
you comfortable with that, Mr. Petrie?
I have no issue.
Okay. All right, so, Mr. Well,
Dusenberry.
does the board have any questions first with regard to engineering, and then we'll go to Mr. Dusenberry? Because we haven't asked many, if any, questions on engineering.
But my point was, and we quite can't, in all due respect, what's the difference when you ask him all at one time, or, I'm just gonna let him finish his
Yeah.
testimony, and then you can ask your engineering questions, and ask, it's not like he has to sit down and stand up again. It's the same
No, he
guy.
can stay standing up. It's okay.
Right, same guy, so, yeah, I just let him.
It just, in my experience, it's just a little bit easier to review a record if you do the testimony in pieces. You do the engineering, and then, based on his engineering testimony, he then makes conclusions as a planner, incorporating both the applicant's testimony, the architect's, and his own. That's
All right,
all. It's
since
just,
we
I
only
mean,
have-
normally, you don't have the benefit of two
Here's
different...
how I'll handle this.
Yeah.
Since we have only one witness involved, okay, I will agree to whatever you three attorneys agree, the easiest way. So, because you're the guys that handle all this.
Well,
I'll leave it to the
Well, I don't
attorneys.
necessarily.
I'd
Whatever
like
the
to
three
do
of them
what-
are happy with.
I'd like to do what my opinion is, what my client is, what my witness is most comfortable with. And just to point out, I understand what Mr. Dusenberry's opinion is, but there are boards, and I'm sure council knows, that hear all witnesses and don't allow questions till all witnesses are
I've
done.
seen that also, and I don't agree with that.
I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying there are various ways to
But
allow
I'm
a
just
case
saying
to
that
be
because it's
presented.
only one witness. But I don't agree with what you, I agree, I've seen that, but I don't agree with it because you want to ask the questions when when the testimony is given,
I'm
not
just pointing
at
out
the end
what
after
is-
another testimony, another
Jerry,
witness.
can we just get on with it?
Well, you wanted to stick your nose into it.
Mr. Petrie, what would you prefer?
I have no preference, Mr. Gassion. We can do whatever way you guys want.
Then, up to me, whatever the chairman
So
wants, or
let's get
whatever
the
Mr.
engineering
Dusenberry
questions
wants.
out of the way. Let's go.
Engineering question, my experience is engineering planning, he gets done with everything, then there's
That's
questions.
fine, let him finish his case.
Okay.
Okay, but that's, I don't really care.
I can bifurcate my question.
He's on a flow here, Mr. Petrie.
Let him go.
So
I'll
maybe
just
we
make
can go with
notes on
the
planning.
planning,
that's
and
all.
then you can segregate it, separate it as you want, Mr. Dusenberry.
Are you comfortable continuing from where you were?
Have no
Yeah,
problem.
we are. Okay.
Yes.
Please continue then.
I'll backtrack for 1 second and say that I offer that the variance for the reduced number of parking stalls can be granted based upon the intent and purpose of the MLUL letter H, which encourages the location and design of transportation routes which promote the free flow of traffic. I offer that the proposed condition vastly improves movements in and out of the site, as well as movements on site. This creates a safer condition not only for the employees and the patrons of the facility, but also for those traveling along Rutgers Road while staff and visitors access this property. Furthermore, the incorporation of a landscape buffer will create a more desirable visual environment for the entire community. This is considered under MLUL purpose number I. Finally, the proposed parking represents a significant improvement in both the overall condition from the existing parking as well as the aesthetic conditions, and brings this site closer to conformance with your ordinance than the existing conditions does. The differential in parking from the existing warehouse hotel facility to the incorporation of the small retail component is 1 space. Our increase is 5, so we're making it better than it is today.
Would you, now that we're deeply into the planning testimony, would you review the use variance?
Certainly. Parts Authority operates within the IB zone, where it serves customers primarily through the delivery of ordered products to area mechanics and vehicle repair part shops. The proposed vehicle repair part component will leverage the existing warehouse and wholesale facility by providing an opportunity for distribution other than through delivery to individual service shops. The two uses, in my opinion, will coexist seamlessly on the site and will each complement the other. We do note for the record that vehicular parts, retail part businesses are only permitted in 3 zones in the municipality: the BB zone, the BD zone, and the BG zone. We further note that the definition of business vehicular retail parts contained within your ordinance reads as follows: any establishment which primarily engages in the sale of new motor vehicle parts. And I use the emphasis on the word primarily because this is clearly a small portion of a much larger operation that deals in auto parts sales. I'm not suggesting that this is an accessory use. I'm suggesting that this is a small part of a much larger, very similar industry. In my opinion, this proposal puts the retail component, as I said, as an ancillary part of the overall property, not principal, not primarily the use of the property, but a separate component to the property. I've looked into the master plan from Belleville from 2009 and the draft update master plan report dated December 2017. While we understand that industries in Belleville, specifically in the valley, were once booming at this location due to the river, we note that this area has seen a great deal of change over time, and your master plan reflects that. The area is now seeing commercial and residential uses integrated into this valley area, scattered between the larger industrial properties and the vacant properties that are in disrepair. In the future land use plan policies from the 2009 master plan, I'd like to reference number 3, changing patterns of the valley. It states, and I quote, "The real estate market in the valley continues to indicate no demand for industrial use and substantial interest in retail commercial development and single-family attached and multi-family residential uses. Except for safe and secure self-storage use, no major commercial development has been constructed in the valley in the past decade." A few paragraphs later, it states, and I quote, "As a result of the 2007 re-examination report recommendations, the amount of area in the valley zoned for IB industrial was reduced and replaced with commercial, retail, and 2-family housing. While our area was not included in any of the referenced changes, our site does now border the RB, RDV, and BF zones. And we note that the BF zone does allow for retail space, but does not specifically allow for vehicle retail parts use. The applicant is seeking to convert 1,980 square feet of roughly 27,000 square feet of building to be retail space. The vast majority of this building will remain industrial as zoned. I would also like to note that one of the goals and objectives mentioned in the master plan, Belleville wants to continue to encourage a balance of land uses, including diversified residential areas, commercial areas to serve the residents of Belleville and nearby communities, and office and industrial areas to provide jobs and to strengthen the tax base. I offer that the granting of this variance the residents of Belleville and the neighboring communities would have another means to further that goal. I note that the incorporation of this minor retail component within this existing industrial facility will help maintain one of the true thriving industrial uses that exists in the valley. Parts Authority has been here at 2 different locations within this zone for a number of years, and they are a company that has stabilized their business within this area. The proposed improvements will drastically improve the visual environment around the site with the addition of new trees, a newly paved parking lot, the reconstruction of deteriorated sidewalk along Rutgers Street, and an upgraded overall facility. While referencing the master plan, it states that the township is looking to move forward. We also needed to consider the municipal land use law to see how our site compares to the intents and purposes laid out in that document with regards to the proof of these variances. I believe that our site advances 2 of the intents of the municipal land use law. Those are items G and I. Item G refers to providing sufficient space in an appropriate location for a variety of uses, including both industrial and commercial uses. It's my opinion that this small retail component in the existing Parts Authority space actually represents a perfect location for this use from a suitability perspective. I offer that this is an appropriate location for both the industrial and retail use. The current zone is right on the border of 3 different zones, one of which allows for retail. I further offer that the current warehouse use provides wholesale auto parts from this very warehouse, which has the ability to serve as a supply area for the retail component that we proposed here today. This provides for a more efficient chain from supplier to customer. Also, in keeping with the trends set forth in your master plan, where retail and residential uses are becoming more integrated into the IB zone, I offer that this small retail component does exactly that while maintaining a use that's been established in this area. I offer that the letter I of the municipal land use law provides for a desirable visual environment. The existing parking that is on site today is unsightly and unappealing in my opinion. The proposed site with the newly paved lot, landscape screening, replacement of deteriorated sidewalks, and current appropriate lighting will provide an upgraded visual appearance for the passerbys that are on the public roadways that surround this property. Our proposal as presented is a way to maintain an existing industrial use while providing for growth within the township. The establishment of the small amount of retail space within this is also in keeping with the land use patterns that are set forth in your master plan.
Finally, Mr. Petrie, would you review the negative criteria?
It's my opinion that the variances will not have any substantial detriment to the public good as presented. In fact, I believe that the improvements to traffic flow along Rutgers will be a benefit to the general public. With regards to both the parking and the use within this area, as I indicated, the nearby zone allows for retail. We're at the intersection of 4 different zones, and at this particular location, any off-street, any off-site parking that's necessary for overflow can be accommodated on 2 of the abutting streets. As for the variances as they affect the zone plan and zoning ordinance, I offer that they are not substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the master plan and the zoning ordinance. In fact, I believe that the use variance is in keeping with the goals of the master plan, which would include maintaining the industrial character where it's possible within the valley, supporting those uses that are thriving within the valley, and adding this minor retail component to this 27,000 square foot building, I consider to be a minor deviation, and your master plan recognizes the fact that commercial and residential uses are moving into the valley, Therefore, I don't believe, into this zone within the valley, therefore, I don't believe that this is a substantial detriment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance.
No further questions, Mr. Schultz.
Okay. Any questions by members of the board based upon any of the testimony?
I have a couple of questions. To get back to the parking situation, throughout the testimony tonight, whenever the retail aspect of this business comes up, it's always referred to as a minor component of the operation. Earlier tonight, Mr. G, the applicant, said that on average, he only has 5 to 10 retail customers coming in each day. I'm trying to reconcile that with what seems to be a pretty significant parking lot there. It looks like you're anticipating a lot more retail business than just 5 or 10 customers per day on the basis of the expansion of this parking lot. So I'm trying to reconcile these two conflicting things. Only 5 or 10 retail customers per day, but you have a parking lot which looks like it's going to accommodate, just ballpark it, 100 customers, retail customers each day. So could you please try to explain to me how 5 or 10 retail customers per day warrants a parking lot with 15 stalls?
Okay. A couple of things. First thing, one of the other things that Mr. G said is that he has these vehicles that are making the deliveries come in and load through this side entrance. So those vehicles that are making the deliveries, while they're only there a short period of time, they're going to come in and utilize the parking, load into those cars that deliver the parts, and move on out. He also has employees. And while some of those employees may have the benefit of utilizing the cars, others don't. So they have to park on site as well. So the component, the 15 spaces within this parking lot, quite frankly, are the most spaces that we could get on the site in compliance with your ordinance. We know that we're well short of the parking requirement, therefore we wanted to make sure that we presented the largest number of spaces that we could that would still comply with the setback requirements of your ordinance.
Thank you. The other question, I think Mr. Lopez was going to ask this, so I'm maybe just taking the wind out of his sail, but the driveway expansion, you're expanding that to 27 feet, you said.
Yes.
Rutgers Street, I had to do a bit of research. In the application, it says that this property is adjacent to State Road, but this portion of Rutgers Street, according to the research I did, and I think Mr. Harris will confirm this, the Rutgers Street technically is a county road. So if you were to expand that driveway, I guess you would necessarily need to get county approval as well for this application.
Because we front on a county road and we're a site plan, we have to get county approval.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, you're right, the driveway curb cut is subject to Essex County approval, and I can tell you that Essex County's minimum requirement for a driveway width that services two-way traffic is 24 feet, and so a flare to 27 is appropriate. And they won't give us a radius there, not for a parking lot of this size. You're welcome.
Any other questions by members of the board?
Does this come into play with a traffic study? Because I heard you say repeatedly, I don't believe, that the entrance to that lot being placed where it's at and expanded is going to be a safety benefit for that area. Have you seen the traffic on that street?
I have seen the traffic on Rutgers. I'm pretty familiar with the valley. I grew up in Nutley, and I spent my high school and early college years hanging out in Mascara, so back
So
in
you're
the day.
familiar with how they speed up and down that street, how heavy traffic is on that street
Yes.
throughout the entire day?
I've been...
Because I work in town and I go through there, I see it, and there's heavy traffic there.
I understand, and that's why an appropriately sized driveway is important for a street like that. I agree with you. Rutgers is a heavily traveled street, and it has a couple of waggles, I'll call it, in it, so the street is not straight. So an appropriate location for this driveway is roughly halfway between the two intersections, which is where this is, and it's appropriately sized for two-way traffic, so that if somebody's coming out of the driveway today, which is only 17 feet wide, somebody can't get off of Rutgers and get into the site today. because they have to wait for that person to clear the driveway. Can't have two cars passing on
Right, I
17
understand
feet.
that.
So widening it so that it's an appropriate width.
So you're talking that it's a safety benefit because you're widening the driveway so that cars can come in and out at the same time, not because of the traffic that's on the street.
If a car is coming out and another car is trying to turn in, and there's not space for that car to turn in, it stops traffic on that street. So it is a safety problem. So widening the driveway fixes that safety problem. It allows for, this car is trying to make a left-hand turn, somebody's coming up, they can make a right-hand turn and come in, or vice versa. This person coming down Rutgers can make the left-hand turn into the site, despite the fact that there's somebody there trying to get out. Without that, with the driveway in the condition it's in today, not widened, that person who wants to make the left-hand turn in has to stop and wait. That stops traffic on a busy street. That's not good. I'm a transportation designer, I design roads, and that's not a good sign. When you widen the driveway to make ingress and egress flow, you improve traffic circulation on the street.
I don't see that happening with somebody wanting to make a left hand going west on that road into that driveway, but I understand what you're saying. The gentleman before, I think referred to him as Mr. G, gave testimony to the fact that they are now most busy between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
And it's mostly deliveries. So his workers, I think he said 5 to 7 cars, if I'm not mistaken, or 7 to 8 vehicles currently coming in and out of this particular driveway. Right now, that's the entrance and exit that they use.
That is correct. Right now, it's 17 feet wide.
Right, it's 17 feet wide, and it's going to be widened even more so that cars, as you said, can come in and out both at the same time. Now, that is a heavily traveled commuter road, right? Meaning that for the most part, prior to 9 o'clock and after 2 o'clock is really when the traffic gets heavy. If this goes to retail, I believe his business is going to increase. Is that not going to increase the traffic to his business beyond the hours that he said he would be most busiest? So if I'm looking for an auto part, I might go there before I go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And after 2 o'clock when I come home from work, is that not going to increase the traffic on this road worse than what it is already?
I think the testimony was that he anticipated about 5 or 6 retail customers in the course of a day. From a traffic engineering perspective, that wouldn't even, you wouldn't even feel that on Rutgers. It's not, it wouldn't have a substantial increase on the number of movements on the street.
Right, but he stated that the reason they moved from Portland to here was because they didn't have the type of exposure that they can get in this place. So if this place goes to retail, given the amount of cars that travel through there,
Excuse me, I don't think that's what my client said. That was not the reason for the move. I don't think that's what the record will reflect.
he mentioned before that he would get better exposure.
He did,
On
but
this
that
corner.
wasn't the reason he said he moved. That's my point.
He outgrew it, basically.
That's correct.
Outgrew it,
Ah.
and also exposure.
Exposure. Did I-
So exposure.
Yeah, so
He said
exposure.
that was an incidental part. The reason for the move was they outgrew the previous location.
Okay, so
He
incidental.
didn't have a lot of retail sale at the other place because he didn't have exposure. That was where that part came in.
Yes.
No
Right.
question,
Yes.
the exposure increased. But again, Mr. Lopez said the reason for the move was to get the exposure. That's not accurate, that's not what he
That's what I
said.
just said.
Right.
That's what I just
No,
said.
and I stand corrected. It would bring exposure.
That's
to-
correct.
To the business being located at this corner, thereby increasing possibly their retail sales, which he mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, was somewhere between 5 to 8%. Right,
Of the overall business volume, yes.
of the overall business volume that they do there now wholesale.
And that was a national average. He
Right,
said that
exactly,
on Cortland
yes.
Street, it was less than that.
Yes, yes, he did. He did mention that it was on a national level, not just this location.
Correct.
Which is when I believe he mentioned the exposure. So, given that, the traffic in this area, given that it's moving into retail, right now it's wholesale. If I'm not mistaken, he said they deliver to body shops, repair shops, or something along those lines. Repair shops close early, I believe they open early. Right? Retail moves on further beyond that, so that the 2 to 6 p.m. period is probably when most of that 5 to 8% he was talking about was going to increase. And you're saying that that is not going to be detrimental to the traffic on Rutgers during rush hour? People coming home?
I don't think you can feel that few cars over that number of hours, no.
We're talking 4 hours, middle of rush hour now.
Four hours.
Most of the time right now, his business starts at 2.
If all 6 of the vehicles that he talked about came in 1 hour, that wouldn't impact the traffic levels on Rutgers Street, because 6 vehicles is just not enough to impact that level of traffic that's on a county road. Can't do it with 6 cars.
You're talking about the 6 cars that do the deliveries, or 6 customers a day?
He suggested 5 to 6 customers, retail customers a day.
At his old location where he didn't have exposure.
I'm not certain that that's what he said, but that's what he anticipated. I thought I heard that he anticipated.
To have only that amount of retail clients at the new location
Yes, in the course of a day.
in the course of the day. I bring it up because I just think that consideration should be given to that driveway to be moved to Portland. Is that Portland Street? Stevens, I'm sorry, Stevens Street. Only because Stevens Street sees a lot less traffic. It's my reason for asking.
Could it be? It can be. It certainly could be. I don't think that that's the most appropriate location for the driveway myself. I think that the driveway wants to be by the entrance to the store. That's where people recognize it. That's where the signage for the building is. I think to put it on the side street.
That's a one-way street, that wouldn't be a logical place to put it.
It is a one-way street, and it also has some residences on it in the existing condition.
Let me ask a question. Isn't Rutgers Street wide enough that if someone was to come up to make the left turn, cannot cars go around that person?
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
That's number one. Number two, anyone coming out of the driveway during the rush hour period, would it be advisable to put a sign that during those rush hour hours, they can only make a right turn?
Well, that's...
Wouldn't that resolve this? Because I don't want somebody coming out trying to make a left during the rush hour. That's ridiculous to me.
Technically, I don't think they can, it's a double line.
No, they can't.
They can.
They can.
And that is a county determination. I think the board can make a recommendation to the county,
You can cross them all.
but
We can make a condition that you can only
Can't
have
pass.
a right turn at
No, we
certain
can't.
hours.
No,
I don't
we
see a
can't. No, we cannot.
recommendation that the applicant makes reasonable efforts to
Put a sign.
request from the county a right-hand
It's
turn
a
only. If the
request.
county says yes, fine. If they say no,
We can't make it,
they would overrule us.
right.
If you look at the shop right on Washington Avenue,
Yes,
you can go in over those lines.
yes.
You can cross over, you can come out, you can go right or left. That is the law. You can't pass cars traveling. That's the law.
That's true.
But you can go in and out of the driveways.
Yes, you go across the double line. I know that.
So Rich, what you're saying is, legally you can't pass a car who's turning left.
If you're going,
On
driving,
the right-hand side.
If you're
You can
driving.
drive it.
but you can make the left turn and go into the driveway.
So somebody on Rutgers who's making a left-hand turn and has somebody behind them, that person has to wait, they cannot
They can go around
They
that
can go
car. There's
around
plenty
it,
of
right.
space to go
There's
around
plenty
that
of
car.
space,
Right,
Yeah, legally you can't.
that's what I thought you had just said, legally that you can't.
You can't.
You can.
You can't.
You can't cross the double line to pass somebody.
No,
No,
you can't
no,
pass them on
no,
the right.
No, no,
On
no,
the
no,
right.
no, no,
If
no,
a
no.
car,
If we go around on the right.
Right, on the
Yeah.
right-hand side.
I'll back down to somebody with police experience, but if a car is stopped to make a left-hand turn with their blinker on, You can pass that car on the right, that's the only time you can pass on the right.
Yes.
Right.
That,
Absolutely.
that may have changed because I
Before
remember many
Lang
years
Road.
ago getting a summons for doing that.
See,
Yeah.
see the police
In Richfield, I believe. I got a summons for going around the car.
Well, you got a improper summons. Because you can do that.
When someone's making a left.
Now you can, but he's saying many years ago.
Right, that
I
was
don't know.
many years ago. I
It's
got
not that
pulled over for doing that in Richfield.
The law hasn't changed in 28 years since I've been a cop, so.
I don't remember if I paid the summons for it. I do remember getting pulled over for it. And I
You
had
don't
the
know, you don't
summons
know if you
issued.
challenged it.
If there's space, you can go to the right of it.
Actually, you know, the other day in Union City, I saw that, where the guy,
You pissed that you did.
was standing at a light, and he went around him on the right-hand side and made a right turn. And the officer pulled him over and gave him a summons for it.
Well, there was probably no turn on right, on red.
No, you could turn right on there.
Well,
But anyway,
Well, would the board want to think about making that
I-
a request,
A recommendation.
a recommendation?
Listen, you make a recommendation, I get sketchy with about putting all these policing agency, you know, like, you know, you can only make a right between this hour and that hour.
That has to be ordinance.
Right, right, it's just,
It's a little,
it's, to
the
me, it's.
enforcement's not that,
Right, then you get into an enforcement issue, you know what I mean? Again, if you can pull out a shop right on Washington Avenue, you can pull out of this lot,
It's a lot less traffic.
a lot less traffic.
there's a lot less traffic on Washington Avenue, it's wide.
No, sir,
14,000 cars a day on Washington Avenue.
yeah.
14,000. There's not 14,000 on Rutgers Street.
I agree. I was only
especially
concerned
coming
about
out
the
of
rush
shop.
hour. That's all I was
Right.
concerned about, with the rush hour.
Right,
I'm not
I was involved in studies when they put up Taco Bell and the other stores, the other auto place over there, and there's 14,000 cars a day that pass on Washington Avenue, either way, both ways. So there's a lot of cars that go up and down
Yeah,
Washington
I
Avenue.
don't think Rutgers is the same as that.
No, I know it's not, but it's not as wide either, so, to get around a car that's turning, left on Rutgers
But
during
to your
rush hour, I
point,
think.
getting out, you know, you have to cross 2 lanes to get out
Right, yes.
And make the left.
and make the left.
That's what I was concerned about.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
And on Washington Avenue,
And it's legal.
Oh, I want-
And it's legal.
But you got a long view.
yeah.
We're not here to make traffic laws.
No,
we're not.
you know, my only reason for asking is the detriment to the traffic on Rutgers to have the opening there. That's my reason for asking.
Well, an extra 5 cars going in a day, I don't think it's gonna kill anything. And my concern was only on coming out. That was it, not going in. Going in, I saw no problems. Going out, and only during the rush hour. Only during the rush hour. So, yeah. But anyway, that's my statement. Anything else? Mr. Gassion, is that it?
Oh, I'm complete.
All right, so you're done. We were asking questions. Okay, Mr. Dusenberg.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Barry, I'm sorry.
He's only got a question.
Barry.
I'm just trying to wake up.
Right?
No offense. All right, Ms. Petrie, you've done hundreds of site plan presentations, have you not? I mean, just as a general
Yes.
practice. I mean, so this is something you do as a diet. Now, is it fair to say that when you present a site plan to zoning and planning boards, that you do just that? You present the site, the entire site, correct?
I do.
All right, so you're not just presenting the focal point of this applicant's business, you have to present everything that the site shows and demonstrates. And to some degree, you've done that. You've taken in the full square footage of the entire warehouse business, right, in the parking calculation, right? But, you know, I still have this problem with not exploring in a little more detail the owner's use of the property. Right? And what pops out to me is the glaring failure to show in any way at all the southerly side of the owner's portion of the premises. Will you point to it for the board, please? Okay. You've said loosely that the owner parks there and they use it for loading and unloading, but you own nothing.
That's correct.
Why?
Well, we do show the metal dock where the loading area backs into. So this is the loading area, right, where the metal dock is.
Okay, so you consider that one of your required loading spots?
That is a loading spot, yes, and that is
Okay.
the undersized loading spot.
Okay, and, all right, it's undersized. If there's a truck parking there, can cars still park there?
The answer is cars park on the left side of that area, stacked, and they're not striped, which is why we didn't, and they don't have the necessary backup, so we didn't count them in our parking calculation.
Okay.
But from a practical perspective, I think the board has asked, and you have asked, how the space functions.
That's what
So-
I'm asking, yeah.
So that's why I indicated that this is where the owners park.
Okay, how wide is that space?
That space is approximately 15 feet wide.
All right, so if a typical box truck is parked there loading...
I'm sorry, this space is 15 feet wide. This space is 12 feet wide. So if a box truck is parked in this area, and we'll mark it on A4, if a truck is parked at the loading area, the truck is parked here, and the cars can be parked in tandem.
Can they come and go?
They cannot come and go.
All right, so basically, that's one of your loading areas.
Yes,
It's undersized,
that is correct.
and it conflicts with existing parking use
It could-
by the owners in that particular space.
That is correct.
Okay, so now, if you look at your sheet SP1, your cover sheet of your plan,
Okay?
all right, you don't have that mounted.
I don't have it mounted.
I'm
You don't need
referring...
to mark, you don't need to mark.
No, that's part of the plans. I'm directing your attention to the third box down on the right that's captioned loading stall calculations. Right? And you've calculated there that 3 loading stalls are required.
That's correct.
And I understand from the notice that Mr. Gassione's office gave you, that there was an issue of size of loading zones, right? And they're asked for some relief, yet you don't show, really, on your plans, loading zones at all. I mean, you're describing for us, okay, now you've identified loading place, number 1. It's not on your plans, doesn't show conflict of parking. I assume the second loading zone is the rear of the property with the ramp over on Cortlandt Street.
Yes, there is an area between the property line and the building that's gated in, and that area has an overall width of 30 feet and an overall depth of 70 feet, and it is completely paved.
Okay, is that compliant with the loading zone specifications in the ordinance?
The ordinance requires a loading space that is 12 feet by 45 feet, so technically, we can have 2 loading spaces in this area.
Okay, but I don't see in that area the shared refuse and recycling enclosure.
Well, if I were to,
Why don't you show us where that is?
if I were to designate 2 12 by 45 foot loading areas inside of the gate, that 45 feet would be here, and 2 12s side by side would be here and here inside of the gate, leaving me an area that's 33 feet by 16 feet that would be available for refuse collection.
Okay, so that's loading zone number 2 of the 3 that you identify as required.
It can be 2 and 3. They can be side by
Okay, so
side.
you think that serves as a double
It's-
loading zone, totally compliant?
As I said, the requirement is for a 12-foot width. We have 30 feet between the building and the fence line.
Now, you've heard all the testimony tonight that most of the ins and outs, if you will, of parts into delivery vehicles are not going to occur at either of those 2 locations, are they? Let me refresh your recollection. The testimony I heard was that all of those ins and outs are coming through the side door at the parking lot.
I think deliveries come to this location.
Correct.
That's
All
what
right,
was...
I stand corrected. All right, so all of the exiting parts
going into delivery vehicles that go out to the 133 deliveries a day, come out that side door,
That is what the testimony was.
and you saw no need to put a loading zone there for those vehicles to be loaded and then leave.
The testimony was that they were cars.
Well, whatever the vehicle is, it's a vehicle that's taking parts, whether it's, a 7-foot muffler and an exhaust pipe, or, a 6-foot or 2-foot axle, I don't know. But the point is, they're being loaded at that point on the site, are they not?
They are being loaded within that parking area, that is correct.
Okay, so then, you're saying a loading designated zone is not needed there because the parking spaces serve for that purpose?
They absolutely can, yes.
Okay, so the parts now come out, but that same side door that retail customers...
Again, I'm going to state my objection again. So far, Mr. Dusenberg has not asked one question about the application. This is an application to expand space. It's a nice 1,970 square feet for retail space. He's going over every possible question he can go over to review everything about this application, having nothing to do with the merits of the application. And I just want to go on record to say
the merits of the use portion maybe, but in fact, I'm talking about the use portion and the retail customers that are going to be coming in and out of the same door that's going to be used for filling the vehicles to leave, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, if I may, there's an objection there, I'm sorry, no, there was no ruling, Mr. Chairman.
No, we're not a court of law. I think, although we may be going slightly far afield, I think I'd rather this board let it in and hear it and give it the weight it's entitled to or not, rather than exclude it. So I think we should just go ahead.
I think I'll get around to it.
Okay, okay.
Okay, sometimes you have to circle the wagons
Yes,
first
okay.
before you shoot your arrows.
All right.
Okay, so, the vehicles will be loaded from the parking spaces, correct?
That was the
All right.
testimony,
Now,
yeah.
existing conditions, that parking lot is exclusively for the use of the wholesale business, presently, right?
Correct.
All right, and maybe for the owners, we don't know where they park any of their extra cars when their loading ramp is full. But that parking lot as it exists is totally under the control of Parks Authority, is it not?
Yes.
Guy parks in the wrong spot, the boss says, move your car. All right, truck wants to come in or out, boss says, park over here. Load your car over here. And in fact, right now, they can pull their cars right up next to that door, can't they?
They can.
All right, and they can come and go without any interference.
That is correct.
Okay. However, once you inject the retail use, now you're sharing that presently fully controlled area with retail customers coming and going, aren't you?
I would not describe the existing parking lot as a controlled area at all.
It's a free-for-all. Okay, that's even worse. So now that you're telling us you're going to tell all of the drivers to park in spaces, walk their parts out to the car, load them up, and you're going to be doing that at the same time retail customers are coming and going in the same lot and going into the building.
Yes.
And you don't see that as a conflict?
Not at all.
All right, Mr. Petrie, and I may be jumping around a little bit from planning to engineering just because of the way the testimony went. You said county planning board approval is required. Are there any DEP approvals?
No.
No, none required, none for the drainage.
No, soil erosion sediment
All
control.
right, and you're too small a site, I assume, to have any requirement to withhold more runoff than present conditions or existing conditions provide?
That is the limitation that's set forth in the ordinance, and we met it.
What about the DEP requirements for stormwater management? Do they apply at all?
They do not apply because it's not a major development.
Okay, all right, just wanted to clarify that. Back to the loading zones. They're not marked at all?
They are not.
All right. Forgive me for a moment, please. Let's go back to the one variance of increased impervious coverage or lot coverage.
Does that include the parking lot in your calculation? Where the requirement's 50% and you have 64%?
The requirements for building coverage is not for.
Okay, it's only building coverage?
Correct.
So the parking lot is excluded from that coverage?
That is correct.
All right, and the existing building footprint hasn't changed, it's 64%?
Correct.
Okay, then I don't have a question about that. I just wanted to clarify that the parking lot increase was not enhancing the variance, and apparently it's not. Just as a little aside, Mr. Petrie, on your hypothetical, if you could have 10 parking spaces on the existing pavement, that didn't provide for a handicap space, though, right?
It did not.
Was there room for it?
It would reduce it to 9.
All right. Let's get to the crux of this, Mr. Petrie. In 2007, the zoning ordinance was changed, was it not?
Yes.
You reviewed that as a planner?
Yes.
Okay. Again, in 2013, wasn't there also a revision to the zoning?
I believe there was, yes.
Okay. Now, you've also testified that other zones specifically enumerate retail sales and specifically automobile parts sales as being permitted uses.
There's 3 zones that permit.
Yeah, the BB, the BD, and the BG.
Correct.
Okay, so those zones allow it. So both in 2007 and 2013 or 14, whatever we decided that revision was, the governing body reviewed the IB zone and specifically said, thou shalt not sell retail. Did it not?
I think the governing body reviewed the industrial zone and didn't change it.
Well, okay, so it stayed the same. So they specifically didn't change the permitted and non-permitted uses in the IB zone, correct?
That is correct.
While recognizing, though, that other zones, even though adjacent to the IB zone, permit the retail sale of auto parts, correct?
That is correct.
So in essence, you're asking the board to legislatively do what the governing body didn't do by allowing retail use to be now permitted on this site.
That's why we're asking for use variance,
Okay.
yes.
Now, if this use variance is granted, is it correct in your view as a planner that this board will no longer have any control whatsoever over the intensity of that use in terms of the gross sales annually, even though they still stay within the 1,950 square feet of retail counter space? Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So this could become 70% of their business, and once the cat's out of the bag, nobody will have anything to say about it. Isn't that correct?
Other than the 1,970 square feet of retail space.
Okay, now, isn't it true that a use variance requires 5 of the 7 votes in this board to pass?
That is correct.
And why is that?
That's because it's a supermajority and it's something that,
Because the law tries to frown on deviations on use when the governing body says otherwise. Isn't that correct?
your words, I don't know that I agree with them verbatim.
Okay, but in spirit?
The use variance is the hardest variance to get in land use because it deviates from a standard that is set by the governing body for how particular zones can be used.
And aren't there enhanced levels of proof that you have to hurdle in order to meet your burden of proof?
There are. In fact, we have to prove that the site is particularly suitable for that use. And I believe that we've proven that.
All right. Now, all of the improvements, the wonderful things that are going to make this site look better, a wider driveway and everything else, can't they be done without approving the retail use?
Anything can be done, Mr.
They
Duke.
can, can't they? Yeah.
Absolutely, they can be done.
So in effect, the carrot is to get a beautiful parking space, providing it comes part and parcel with the retail permission for that use to proceed, isn't it?
That's what the application is about. The application is about an entire package of what we're proposing.
I have no further questions.
Any further questions by members of the board? Any questions by members of the public of this witness? None. Is that the end of your case?
You have a redirect for this witness, but other than
Okay,
that, it's the end of my
redirect.
case.
You may redirect. Before you redirect, maybe I should do it this way. Does any members of the public wish to ask the witness any testimony based upon his testimony? Any questions based upon his testimony? Because otherwise, that way we don't have to do redirect twice. Okay, Mr. Gassion, you may redirect.
Mr. Petrie, Mr. Dusenberry asked you about the supermajority of the 5 required votes for a use variance. Do you think possibly the reason for that would be a more significant type use variance, such as a commercial use in a residential zone or an industrial use in a residential zone, as opposed to a minor ancillary use of sales in a warehouse or industrial zone?
Well, I know that the law is the same for any type of use variance, and I think that this is clearly a less significant use variance than some of those that you have outlined, yes.
I have no further questions.
Okay, again, members of the board, any questions? Any members of the public?
One question.
Go ahead.
Were you familiar with this property was previously used for?
I don't have a recollection for what the property was previously used for. I just don't.
I think, I know it was vacuum.
I know it
Yes,
was.
right.
I'm familiar with it.
We're very familiar with
That's
this
why
part.
I'm asking what, everybody here knows.
No, but it's not after that.
Mr. Dusenberry,
Yes, sir.
are you going to provide any witnesses or
No,
not?
at the
Okay.
outset, I said I was not, and I
Okay.
will stand by that.
All right, now, any members of the public wish to give testimony on this application? None. Then, Mr. Gassion, would you like to sum up?
No, I'd like to wait for Mr. Dusenberry, so I get the opportunity to go there.
I was hoping you'd let me go last.
Let me jump on.
As the applicant, he's entitled to that.
Okay.
All right, I think the end of Mr. Petrie's testimony basically said it all, and obviously in my questions, I foreshadowed what I'm going to say to you now. And that is, you have a zone. The zone has been reviewed by the governing body at least on 2 occasions. The governing body has said, we recognize a specific use of auto sales parts and the general use of retail sales. And we've decided that in the IB zone, that doesn't exist solely in this part in the valley. There are a couple other blotches of it, I think, right in your town, maybe 1 or 2 that I saw in my cursory review. The point is that the governing body said no. So you really need some compelling reason to say yes. More than just we like it, more than just we think it will make our business better. You need to have special reasons. You heard some stuff about traffic, about the goal of the MLUL to beautify and enhance the landscaping and the parking lot. All those are fine, but they're not good enough for a use variance. Once you approve this use variance, you can't put the bullet back in the gun, all right? This can go to 50% of their gross sales at this location. They moved to this site specifically with retail in mind. They didn't have the right to do it. Whether they knew it or not is in question, but they did it. They've been there now for 2 years doing wholesale only. They haven't moved out. They're doing fine. So losing 5% of their gross sales because they don't get retail isn't gonna, break the bank. So why is it so important? Because I think it's gonna be more than 5. It's gonna be 10, it's gonna be 15, it's gonna be 20, and you're not gonna get any more review, any more opportunity to look at the parking and say, what have we done? And do you wanna sit here 3 or 4 years from now and say, who approved that? Do you want to do that? Do you want it on your heads to be the ones who approved that? When you don't have to, there's no reason to. They could have moved somewhere else if retail was really a factor. If retail's really a factor, let them open a store in one of the other zones where it's permitted, and they can move their stuff not into the next room. Okay, it would be nice and convenient. They can move it over to their retail outlet if they choose to do that, if that's what their business model is. But they're coming here and saying, we're in, give us forgiveness, not permission. That's what they're asking you for, and they're trying to buy it with improving from chaotic parking right now, but solely controlled chaotic parking, to more spaces, but it's still only 15 versus 47 required. Let's not lose sight of that. And it's still 5 of those 15 are the requirements for the retail space. Okay, maybe numerically it's 1 increase, but that's not the issue. That's just a subterfuge to make you feel like this is de minimis, inconsequential. But breaching your sanctity of the ordinance as dictated by the governing body is a big deal, and you shouldn't do it. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Gassion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dusenberry says the governing body reviewed this ordinance and said, we're not changing it. I doubt very much the governing body looked at each particular section of the ordinance. Most of the time, they have something in mind when they review the master plan, and that's what they're concerned about. They're not looking at every section and saying, we're going to look at this, 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 and this, and we want this to stay that way. I doubt that. Mr. Dusenberry said, 1 space is not the issue. Yes, it is. That's what this variance is all about. 1 additional required space when it comes to parking. That's the issue. As the bulk, other than the parking, they're all pre-existing. We're seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval in addition to the bulk variances to convert 1,970 square feet of an existing 19,951 square feet of warehouse space to retail use. Now, there was discussion by Mr. Dusenberry that this will grow possibly to 15, 20%. You heard testimony from my witness, who is certainly a credible witness. I think you can tell that very easily by listening to him. He's responsible for the 12 stores in New Jersey that Parks Authority has. There are over 200 stores throughout the country. Based on the retail sales at all of these stores, they average 5 to 8%. Why is it going to go to 15 or 20% at this location if that's not what happens throughout the country? They're only changing 10% of the square footage to retail. A small percentage of the parts business is retail. There's no expansion of the footprint whatsoever. As I said, the parking requirement is 47 spaces. We only have 15. But right now, there is maybe 9 or 10 spaces. So we're increasing the available spaces by 5, and the requirement change is 1. So there's actually a plus in the parking. In addition, you're going to have the striped paved parking lot that looks a hell of a lot more attractive than what is in existence at the present time. We have an objector who is obviously a competitor. That's Mr. Dusenberry's client. You don't have neighbors here objecting. There's not a neighbor here objecting to this application. They don't see it as a problem. A competitor sees it as a problem. Does a competitor have a right to object? He certainly does. No question about that. But I think the board can look a little differently at a competitor objecting as opposed to the next door neighbor complaining about the ingress and egress or the parking. I think you have to look at the application in light of all the benefits that will flow from it. As I said, you're reconstructing a bituminous and gravel lot to create one nice parking lot. You're creating landscaping where basically none exists. There's an improvement in the drainage. That you won't have the sheet flow coming off. You got a detention system. You got increased lighting for security. You've got improved ingress and egress to a parking lot with organized parking spaces. Certainly much safer than the existing circumstances. It's certainly more aesthetically pleasing than the existing circumstances. What with the landscaping, the paved parking, the striped spaces, the appropriate lighting. I'm going to repeat the same thing. The parking requirement is increased by 1. You're helping to revitalize the valley section with a use that is not residential. We don't have within 5 feet of the property line anymore. It's 47 spaces versus 46 spaces. As I said, it's 4 spaces more that we have. The owner obviously is not using the parking lot, and he occupies 7,000 or 8,000 square feet of the property. This is not, as I said, industrial use going into a residential location. This is just allowing a small percentage as an ancillary use of the property of sales. It's certainly not a substantial detriment. 5 or 6 customers per day is inconsequential. There was concern about access onto Rutgers Street. As my expert said, 5 or 6 cars on a daily basis has no effect whatsoever on the traffic on Rutgers Street. He indicated that if 5 or 6 cars in the course of 1 hour would have no effect. My witness, my expert witness, talked about the planning and said he referred to G of the purposes of zoning, and it refers to providing sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including industrial and commercial. Another, he referred to letter I in the purposes of zoning, promotes a desirable visual environment. Certainly, we are going to promote a desirable visual environment. We're improving the looks. And obviously, when you talk about the definition of retail, business retail, vehicle retail parts sale, he talked about an establishment which primarily engages in the sale of new or motor vehicles. Well, we're primarily engaging in the sale of auto parts which are distributed, and as to the retail space, it's really an ancillary use at this location. The real estate market in the valley will be helped by businesses such as this. You certainly don't want to chase a business such as Parts Authority if they consider this important out of this location. We need that kind of business in the valley section of Belleville so that we have an ability to continue to maintain the industrial, commercial, retail use in the valley. I think there is certainly no detriment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan, and certainly no substantial detriment because you're not doing any harm to anyone at this location. Again, we don't have an objector from the neighborhood. There's no one who objects to this application. I thank the board for its time and attention to this complicated case.
Okay, gentlemen, ladies, I would like to make a statement. Go ahead, Ken. A lot of people on the board weren't here several years back, and this property came up before us once before.
Twice.
Or once was, the one time I was a unanimous decision, I think there was 75 to 100 units going to be put there, which would have had 100 or so, maybe more cars parked on that location. To me, this is nothing compared to what we already approved. We already already approved something that was gonna be 100, maybe 200 times more cars every day, maybe 300 times more cars every day than this location has. We already approved it for that, so in my opinion, how could I not approve something that's a small retail business? That only a few cars is gonna be there.
To add to that.
I make a motion, we
Wait,
approve.
wait, wait, discussion now, we're not ready for motions yet. I will add to that, I remember it as coming before us twice. First, it came before us, I believe we approved 60 units, which would have required 120 parking spaces.
Right.
And the second time, they brought it down to 40 units, which would have required 80 parking spaces. Okay, now the other thing I want to say about this is that these two blocks, of which this is one of them, are the only two blocks on Route 7, which is the entrance from both Bergen County and Hudson County into Essex. And also Route 7 then continues onto Washington Avenue. And on the other side of the river, and even below here, I believe maybe the BF also allows this, which is right below this, okay? It may allow this, on the other side it definitely does when you go over the river. I says, and on Washington Avenue it allows this use, okay? Now, I also want to point out that recently, our planning board and our town council approved the lot directly across the street, which used to be School 1, to have a commercial use of a gas station and a convenience store. And that's directly across the street, okay? So, and when you go over use changes or zoning changes, the council don't do it. It goes before the planning board, of which 2 council members are members, Class 1, which is the mayor or his representative, and a Class 3, which is another council member, out of 9. And they make recommendations to the council as a whole on any changes. So it's not the council that reviews everything, it's the planning board that reviews everything. Okay, now in my opinion, I think this is a good application. I don't think it would hurt at all. I don't think it would increase any intensity to any significance. And I have no problem with this application. However, if we approve it, I want the approvals for the residential units to then die because it's been abandoned by this use.
I agree, this will be a better use.
Okay?
Unless-
Anyone else has anything to say?
I have a concern.
Go ahead.
The fact that we are allowing retail into the IB zone, it's almost as though we're kind of doing spot zoning. As we all know, the council just revisited the zoning for the entire township, and they made changes where they felt it was necessary. But for some reason, I'm hoping it's not negligence, incompetence on their part, but for some reason, they decided to keep the IB zone as is, not to allow retail. And I just have the feeling, based on this new parking lot and the location of this business, that this entity is going to see a dramatic increase in retail activity in the coming years. And we may, as Mr. Dusenberry pointed out, we may be seeing, we're going to let the cat out of the bag, and there won't be any control. We could have a major problem here as a result of this business, which could very likely exponentially expand. Another thing, Mr. Gassion, with all due respect to him, he said, well, in separate sentences, he said, there are no residential objectors, but this is going into a non-residential area. Well, I guess the reason why there are no residential objectors is because the property on the other side of Stevens Street is a graveyard. And if any of those people were here tonight to object, well, we'd have one hell of a...
That whole street has houses on it, that's not fair.
Right across the street, right?
There's not fair, there's houses there. It's not fair.
There's a lot of houses there.
But
Not
those
fair
are
to say
outside.
that, that's wrong. That's wrong,
Rich,
I'm
aren't
sorry.
those beyond 200 feet?
200 feet is definitely in those houses.
Yes.
They're
Definitely in those
houses
houses, so
within
you're making a
200 feet
misstatement here.
All right, well, I stand corrected, because I thought the only thing within
In the
200
BF
feet
zone,
was
there's
the
houses.
cemetery.
In the BF zone, there is houses. If you see it, look at this map.
Right, just-
Look at the right map.
All right,
All right, on the lower half the BF zone, there is houses on the right-hand side. I ought to know, because I used to pass them every day to go to Jersey City. That's the, see the BF zone down there?
Could I say something? With regard to expansion, if we're talking about a physical expansion, we're only dealing with 1,970 square feet, and I think that should, for clarity, I don't know if we need it, but for clarity, that's what we're dealing with, 1,970 square feet.
Actually, I think it's a lot simpler than that. Because when you look at what was approved, which was 40 or 80 units, whatever way you want to look at it, you know, part of our job is, you know, what I view as a less intense use,
Yes.
okay? And personally, I'm the number one in favor for 40 to 80 units in the first place. So if I had my pick, right, I'm gonna pick, because I remember, because I'm gonna date myself, when Vacuum Max was in its prime, and the tractor trailers were double parked
Yes.
on that street. So I mean, talking about volume, you know, we had to make our way around tractor trailers on that particular street. Huh? Constantly. So I think part of our job is to figure out what's a less intense use. I think this, compared to what was approved, I'd like to get that off the books and have this use
Permanent.
permanent.
Yes.
Me personally, you know, and maybe Mr. Dusenberg is right. I might live to regret it, but I gotta go on what I know, what I've seen from my experience being here, and what was approved. I'm personally like to be able to have a second swing at the back, if you will, and get rid of those 40 units potentially.
I agree with you 1,000%.
That's kind of what I'm at.
And to finish this, also on the east side of Stevens is residential properties. And also that side street going up, which I can't make out what it is, there is also residences there on the left side of the 200-foot circle, right here. Those are all residential. Here, this is the only cemetery, right here, that's it. Here is residential too.
That's Belleville Avenue.
Belleville Avenue? Okay, Belleville Avenue, that's loaded with residential.
The prior use for 40, whatever it is, 40 units.
Yes, which was
has that-
before you were on the board, by the way.
Right, yes, I know, you've explained to me, thank you. But has that now, because of the passage of time, has that effectively expired? Is that still?
No, I believe that follows with the land until something else is made that replaces it. Once something else is made that replaces it, that use is considered abandoned, and it's gone forever.
If the zone is changed, and I don't know, if the zone is changed and those 40 units are not permitted by that new zone, then they're dead. Let's leave it at that. They're probably not valid anymore.
Also, if we approve this, they're dead, because now the use has been abandoned that they requested.
If this has always been an IB zone, then let me just ask, how did it first get approved
Great
for
question.
residential?
It got approved for residential, as I remember, because Value Max needed to move. They said they couldn't sell it to anybody, nobody wanted to use it anymore for industrial, but that has changed over the last 10, 15 years. There is more residential, not residential, I'm sorry, commercial and industrial looking to be used in the valley. And now, you can see, this is like a comeback. And we just approved, if I'm not wrong, in the block, I believe it's block 8606, a number of commercial uses and industrial uses. Or yeah, where they did the thing with the nuts, we approved the thing with the nuts. Yeah, and there was supposed to be cars being washed, yes, exactly. And that's directly across the street, if I'm not mistaken, on Portland.
It's on Valley and Rutgers.
Valley and Rutgers. Valley and Rutgers, okay.
So if I understand what you're saying is that when this matter appeared before the zoning board years ago, long before I became a member,
Right.
as a condition of the approval, you allowed residential to be built in the IB zone.
Yes. It was a variance. We approved it, it was a D, actually, it was a D, was like this. It felt different, it was a D application. Okay. Any Any other members wish to give comments?
I second what Michael was saying before, but there had to be a reason why, when this was looked at, it was not approved for retail sale. There had to be a reason for it. So I can't, in good conscience, thinking about what this could become, agree to this occurring in this area. I just can't. That's my feeling.
Well, but that said, I mean, then we can go back to the 40 units and have all of those cars parked there. To me, that doesn't make sense. We got a chance here to correct it.
You have New York Transit bus that goes through there. I think it's the only one that comes across most of the town that goes down through that area. If they were to put a 40-unit development there,
You'd have 100 cars.
for the most part, the people who commute to New York City will not have cars. They'll be using transit.
But you're making assumptions. They might live in town, they may stay here forever. There'd be 100 cars there.
Yeah, but if they work...
In and out of Rutgers Street all day long.
If they work in New York and the development
You're looking at it wrong, I'm
the
sorry.
parking in the back.
You're looking at 20 cars a day compared to over
I
100.
disagree with you, in the sense that it's the only public transportation area that we have where a bus goes through Belleville, straight out to New York City. And I'm thinking that the prior people who said that they did not want to see the retail there and considered the 40 units was probably because they were thinking that commuters will move into that place and will travel into the city to work, back and forth. It's right in front of the building that the transit goes through. So I can see them envisioning a 40-unit property there instead of
You're partially right.
what we're seeing there now.
You're partially right.
And for that, and not only that, but also
Doesn't
what I
mean that
envision
is-
seeing happening there with the, if, I have a question that I didn't get a chance to ask. Can I ask it now?
No.
I don't know, why?
Well,
Yes,
of the
yes,
board.
yes.
This is
Oh,
the
sure,
question I
yes.
want to ask. It was mentioned before that this property is leased. The application is being done by the person who leases the property, not who owns the property.
Well, they have to.
Yes, but they have to sign off, the owner has to sign off.
I understand that. I understand the signing off. I know the process on that. I understand that. I know the owner signed off on it. My question is, if you were bringing in 5 to 6 retail customers a day into this establishment, you don't own it, you lease it, and you're going to invest all this money to fix it, obviously something's coming down the road. So,
No.
I just...
What would be coming
The
down
whole
the road?
idea of, even if they
The
had 20
increase of
cars
the
coming
retail
in.
business.
So what?
Let me
a great thing.
let me cut into
Not in this
this
area.
over the difference between residential and commercial, okay? And industrial. As far as residential is concerned, they came for us for 60 units. They couldn't get approval for finance for the 60, so now they come back for 40. And apparently, after they came back for the 40, they couldn't get finance for that either. Now I'm gonna tell you something else.
No, Jared, the guy got sick.
All right, the guy got sick. Let's take the property directly across the street,
Same
which is a
scenario, right? The guy
redevelopment
got
zone,
sick.
all right?
What it was gonna be. the
It was
guy got
supposed
sick,
to
it's
be
no longer gonna be that.
residential, and then they came back and asked for commercial. Now, the other part of this is,
No, Jared.
what do you mean, no?
It was residential and retail.
All right, residential and retail, and then they came back for commercial. They asked for the gas station and the convenience store, am I right?
That's
Okay.
where a school was, right?
All right, that's where the school number 1 was.
Where
Now-
there was a lot of traffic coming in
Yeah,
and out.
now let me explain to you, no matter what, when you have residential, you have to provide town services. A property with this use, you provide hardly any town services, and you get ratables out of it. So the question is, do you want to throw ratables away that you don't have to provide any town services for?
Well, I get it. I think we're getting, I understand his point, and he's correct in this thing. I just don't believe that's the proper location. I agree with you that we need to encourage the 40-unit type of people to want to invest in Bell.
About there.
I I didn't say that.
Oh.
You heard what I said. So I don't totally disagree with you. However, I don't think that was the best suited location. There are some other projects that you know and I know that are of that mindset. And that's we need to, but right now,
And those properties are mindset with this, right? What do they have traveling in front of them? Public transportation.
yes, correct,
right?
yeah.
This is the only area in this town, on Rutgers Street, where we have a decamp bus that gets you from that location
I won't agree with
into
you
the
when you say,
city
you
in
keep saying
40
the only
minutes.
area, I don't agree with that.
But that use is not being proposed and hasn't been proposed for over 10 years.
What use is being proposed?
Residential. You're asking for a hypothetical residential, which when it came before us was over 10, 15 years ago,
Right,
and it's
right.
never came to fruition.
Exactly.
So now you have to go by what you can get for
This is
fruition.
why that
That
area
was
looks the way it
even a
does.
bigger problem with traffic, if you've got 40 units and people only have one car, which they're supposed to, what they're allowed to have is two, right?
Yes.
That's 80 cars, when this is only maybe tops 10 extra cars a day. 20, even
But
said 20.
the hypothetical is not before us.
Yeah.
This is
This
before us.
is-
You're planning something hypothetical, which is not before
Belleville
us.
needs to improve their areas, I'm sorry, I think it's a good thing.
Well, again,
This, you gotta
And
put some
everybody's
things
got
in
their own
order to, yeah, in order
That's
to
mine.
that's the point.
make
That's-
areas
We need to
viable.
respect each other's opinion.
Yes. Oh, I respect. Oh, yeah, sure. So now, DeWine.
Just one last question.
Go ahead.
I understand the explanation that the prior zoning board approval goes along with the property. So it's as it stands right now, this parcel of land is approved for 40 units. But since 10 or more years have passed by, if some developer wanted to build on this, they would still have to either come back before the planning board or the zoning board for site plan
Nope.
approval.
No. Site plan was approved back then.
If they wanted to do the exact same thing that the board approved, and if 10 years is not a short period of time, and it depends on what, if any, zone changes occurred, what, if any, public health or safety issues arose, which attached to an approved project like this, it would have to be looked at by Frank, by Tom, by myself, to see if they could just go ahead and build what he approved. But if they want to change pretty much anything on there, yes, they'd have to go back. But they could, if certain criteria are met, build. But that's,
And then you might have some kids going to your school system.
but you have to look at the area, any changes and things like that.
I'm gonna bring it up.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's where we are.
All
Well,
right.
I just want to say one thing. I drive past, this is how I go to work every day, to go to Lyndhurst. And the area is definitely in need of attention. And I think Parks Authority is a great business. I think it's a very viable business. Aren't we proud that over 200 businesses that, we've got one right here? I think doing the work that you're doing will improve the area. I wouldn't use non-native Norway spruce trees if I was doing the landscaping, and I would try to choose a native tree. So if that can be done, I'd appreciate that. And don't forget, you're using conifers, which do form sort of a fence and hide things. I'm not going to suggest that we're hiding anything, because you are upgrading the parking area. You're not using deciduous trees. That's okay too, unless anyone thinks they should use deciduous and go with the blossoms or eastern redbud, native blossom tree.
This is her thing, by the way.
Take notes. I think the sales are so minimal, and it's great that a business like this is here. I think that little corner will look much nicer, especially adjacent to the cemetery and the historic property that's there. I hope and would like to assume or look down the road and hope that that's encouraging to other things that might happen in the area, given whatever changes are happening to our zoning or master plan. That's really all I want to say.
Well put.
Thanks.
Very well put. So do we,
Mr. Corso had that.
who?
Mr. Corso had that.
Mr. Caruso, had a motion to approve with all the stipulations.
Well,
that
we
mentioned.
have,
No, does he still feel the same way?
I have a couple of questions, one thing to say.
Go ahead.
You gotta remember, Rutgers Street has 3 traffic lights, and traffic will be controlled by the 3 traffic lights. And there's a 4-way highway, and you have no problem. I was concerned about parking and the highway, and the going out of the parking lot. Everything was answered, and you gotta remember, there's 3 traffic lights that control traffic, and there's no problem.
Very well put. Very well put. So I assume your motion to approve is still there?
Yeah.
Do I get a second? Seconded by Mr. Giordano. I assume with the conditions that
we
we
have, where
And
normal
and the
conditions,
conditions that we
in
have.
terms
yeah.
of complying with the reports, are normal.
permit with this, taking a permit out with the 2 years.
I want the, I'd like to see any and all prior approvals that have been in ban, no
Yes.
further effect. Gabby has raised the landscaping issues. I didn't get it all, I'll be honest, but Michael, did you get what she was suggesting?
I'll help you.
Can we go along with that? The landscaping changes
What type of-
suggested by the
what type
board.
of trees you think?
Well,
Well, if we're going to do a conifer, make it a native conifer of New Jersey, not a Norway spruce. You probably can get a list of native species. Or because don't forget conifers have that triangular shape. So think about what that's going to look like. I mean, I appreciate they're doing landscaping, but our conifers, Belleville, and, I don't know if we ever put that in any of our zoning, what we want to see. In our zoning, in the Meadowlands, we do, because we border wetlands and there's different things that we look for. So vegetation is very important to us. So deciduous trees are trees that are different from conifers because they're like our maples and oak and I don't know what you guys think.
if you need any help, Michael, just let me know and I'll put you in touch with them.
Perhaps a review by a subcommittee of an alternate landscape plan could be a reasonable condition.
That works for me.
Okay. Is there anything else we have to throw in here?
No, we're good, we're good.
Motion and a second.
So motion,
We have a 2-year,
2-year requirement to get the permit, which I think they'll get tomorrow. They have to wait, I think it's 45 days from after we do the resolution. So motion made by Mr. Caruso, seconded by Mr. Giordano with the conditions.
Takes 5 yes votes are needed.
Clerk, call the roll. And who will be voting is only the regular members because the 2 alternates can't vote. Go ahead.
Bennett.
Yes.
Caruso.
Yes.
Giordano.
Yes.
Lopez.
No.
Sully.
Very cautious, yes.
Valado.
Yes.
Del Garcia.
Yes, approved 6-1.
Very good, yeah.
Congratulations to Mr. Garcia.
I'll let you.
One on my desk by 7 a.m. 7 a.m. next
Right,
week.
let's tell it all.
Next week.
This was really good.
Oh, yeah, we're still.
Yes, we're still in session. Is there anything else? No. Yeah, there's no resolution. Motion to adjourn.
You were the one.
Motion, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. That's it.